Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 31. Voyager Season 6, Episode 12. Blink of an Eye.
Send it again.
The entire sequence? How about just the prime numbers?
You're tired.
So are you.
The prime numbers and the elemental constants. Then we'll stop.
An acceptable compromise. It's not as if they're going anywhere. If they even exist in the first place.
Do you doubt that?
I doubt everything.
So you weren't one of those children that had the entire series of skyship friends?
Actually, I had them all. Even the duplicates. You couldn't walk into my home without tripping over a friend or two.
Not in our home. My grandfather wouldn't allow it. He told us that the skyship was a palace where an evil protector lived. He said that bad children were sent there to be punished. At this point, I'd be happy to see anything. Evil or not.
Papoosaronium.
Poo-poo-cereal?
Yeah, papoosary.
Arboretum. Papoosaritum. Poo-poos and rectum. No, the poo-poos and rectum.
Papoosaritum would be where you display a variety of papooses.
Mm-hmm.
But a papooseria would be where you go to acquire and consume papooses.
Well,
I had papooseria.
That's a subtle difference.
Papooserectum.
It is a subtle difference. And there's a subtle difference. Actually, there's a not so subtle difference in between the time frames the crew of the Voyager is experiencing.
Uh-oh.
The papooseria was running out of my
And the planet.
papooserectum.
Oh, transition.
Welcome to It's Got
Segue.
Star Trek. It's got Star
In the
Trek.
blink of an eye, there was a transition.
Episode, I think 31. And tonight, this week, we are discussing...
Episode 31?
No, well, okay. This is the complicated thing. When you're
Season
doing
6, episode 12.
you're doing an entertainment podcast where you're discussing television programs that have episodes, there are episodes of the podcast, and then there are the episodes that we're watching.
That's all you had to say was, I meant of the podcast. Not,
Oh, so this is episode 31 of the podcast?
I did say that, but I just thought I'd expound on that because it's been something that's been slightly annoying me in our naming conventions, because it's like, this is episode 31, and the episode we're talking, too many, using the word twice in a row is complicated, but sometimes...
So you're just trying to lay it all out there so we're all on the same
I'm just saying,
page
I'm just telling the audience that we are aware of what's going on. There's nothing we can do about it at this stage. I'm just aware. I'm aware that saying the word episode too much can be both confusing and grating to the ears.
Podcast-isode.
Gormagander.
Toboggan.
But yes, so this is from Voyager's Season 6, Episode 12, Blink of an Eye. And we know that's the name of the episode because that's what Wikipedia says. It's what Netflix says. It is also what Janeway says early on in the episode.
Yeah.
And
she gives it away.
Sometimes it happens like this.
She totally gives it away. A couple of stats on this. It was first aired January 19th, the year 2000 on the UPN network, the United Paramount Network.
Unless we want to live our lives in the blink of an eye, I suggest we find a way out of here.
Yeah. I mean, she's right.
I'm not going to try her voice right now.
It wasn't that forced.
Do you guys remember the year 2000?
In the year 2000.
Remember when they kept doing that bit? Because it was like
was
after
great. Because it was a
on
great
Conan.
bit.
Yeah. They kept doing...
This.
It became a totally different bit.
This episode was directed by Gabrielle Beaumont, and she's notable because she directed TNG's Booby Trap. That was the first episode she directed of Star Trek. And she was the first woman to direct any Star Trek at all, movie or TV, up to that point, up until she directed Booby Trap. So that's cool. And it was written by Michael Taylor and Joe Menosky, who are both longtime, big-time, super high-level Star Trek writers. So they know what's up. There's a couple of notable cast members here. The main one, of course, is Daniel Day Kim, who was probably most famous for being on Lost. He was also on Enterprise. He had, a small role.
Hawaii Five-0.
Yeah, Hawaii Five-0. He's very famous for that. But anyway, it was cool seeing him in this episode. It's been forever since I saw this episode. I'm sure I did not know him when this aired in 2000.
Yeah.
And I might have seen this in 2005 or something last time. It's been a long time since I've seen this particular episode.
I knew you were going to do that.
Or Long Road.
Then
Long Road.
you have, I mean, these, you could argue whether these are notable or not, but they jumped out at me. Kat Sawyer, she plays the other astronaut. She plays Daniel Day Kim's colleague who doesn't make it, who flies up from the planet.
Yeah.
And
they fly up from that planet pretty fast.
so
From the planet.
Up from the planet.
I didn't know who she was. I didn't recognize her name, but I recognized her face. And then when I looked her up on IMDb, it's because she's one of those people who just guest stars in pretty much everything. Been on Boston Legals and, all that stuff. But she was on Breaking Bad. She was on House.
Wow.
She was on Empty Nest.
Weird.
The Golden Girls. Jake and the Fat Man.
She's been around.
Knight Rider.
Fat man.
Get this. She was on Too Close for Comfort.
Wow, we were talking
course
about
she
that
was.
show, weren't we?
She was on Simon and Simon.
Oh, man.
She was on Heart to Heart.
Simon.
Oh,
Simon
because
Hart
And
Dog.
she was
was
on
a-
Murder, She Wrote.
There was a previous Star Trek episode we were talking about where there was an actress from Too Close for Comfort.
Yeah.
I think it was. It
was
was a Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it was the past tense.
Yeah.
Was she in past tense? Or is this a different?
No,
Yeah.
this is
Too
a
Close
different
for-
person.
From Too Close.
different person.
From Too
Yeah,
Close for
sorry.
Comfort?
Yeah, Too Close for Comfort is the nexus for Star Trek,
Yes.
as it turns out. And then, the Obi Ndefu is, he played the protector guy.
Yeah, I
Mm.
guess.
And I was like, I know I recognize that guy
Yeah.
from somewhere.
Dawson's
And
Creek.
he was on Dawson's Creek. He played Bodie Wells. He had like a pretty long role on there. He played Rachnoor on Stargate SG-1. I don't remember the character name, but I remember.
Was that a show worth getting into? Stargate?
Yeah, SG-1 was good, at least at the beginning. I really enjoyed SG-1.
All I ever saw was the movie, and nobody ever really remembers the movie. It's like
movie-
Buffy the
yeah.
Vampire Slayer. Nobody really remembers the movie.
And I think Stargate SG-1, the movie, is actually quite good.
Wait, is did
Well,
they make-
Stargate the movie.
Oh, yeah, there
and then
were- I
the
was wondering
show
if they
is
made-
SG-1.
I was wondering if they made any second or third movies that went under the radar.
No, the show
or
was
anything.
more fun, and I can't vouch for it because it's been I watched it when it was on. I never watched it
Yeah.
since, and I didn't follow up with the Stargate Atlantis.
This
and all
says
that
he
stuff.
was in a DS9 as well.
Yeah, he played Drax. It was actually his first film role. This guy, Obi Ndefu's.
He was
first,
also in Angel.
Yeah, he was Drex in Way of the Warrior. So I think.
Word.
Yeah, so I have to go back and watch that. That'll be one we watch one of these days. We'll watch Way of the Warrior.
I kept feeling like I recognized the telescope dudes. Both of them in a way.
Yeah, they
like,
both seem familiar.
Yeah.
One was kind of a David Schwimmer type, but like a proto David. No,
You talking about the one with the long head?
Okay, one of those guys was in Seinfeld.
Yeah, and both of those actors.
I just didn't recognize who it was.
Yeah, I looked them up. I mean, one of the things that was cool about this episode is we got that opportunity to see all these effectively vignettes through time on this planet, and they had to hire different actors, and they had to do
Yeah.
different set design and costuming. And I thought they did a really good job.
That was really cool, and they sort of kept the coherence of each one was trying to make contact
Yeah.
with the ship in a different way. So the primitive guys, they were like, we got to build a bigger altar.
Yeah.
And then the one that was sort of like late medieval or something, it was like, I'm a powerful dude, and I bet you there's a powerful dude up there, so I'm going to send him a letter, one powerful dude to another powerful dude.
Yeah, he just kind of assumed that there'd be more protectors up there, and they'd all work together or something.
And then like the other guys that were some kind of Art Deco steampunk or whatever, and like they were like not steampunk, but whatever comes after steampunk,
Post steampunk.
like diesel punk, and they were just blasting math at him or something. Like what is that? Like we did that too. Like
Yeah, we still do
when we
that.
send
That's-
stuff like I mean we send stuff
If you send-
all sorts of stuff,
yeah,
but like
prime numbers.
We first started sending like mathematical stuff out there because we figure like well.
If they're smart, they'll figure it out.
But that's but
You know-
math could just only be a function of how our brain works. So
Well, I guess it's just because it transcends language, and that
we just think it's gonna yeah.
Yeah,
that was the other thing is the early people where there's the protector and the old science dude or whatever. The protector was assuming they spoke the same language and could read the same writing.
you mean English? You mean
Yeah,
he wrote
well,
an English letter?
Yeah, but yeah, right. I
They're
guess
going to be
that's-
able to tell that it's a language, and they'll be like, okay, well, now we can probably figure out this language. If we're advanced enough, we know it's a language, and we know we can figure it out eventually.
So
from one note.
But that hot air balloon ain't getting up to that ship.
Well, he just thought it was a protector of another star or whatever.
Yeah, right.
I like the hot air balloon. It was because it's of course it's you're saying okay, it's not going to work, but it was pretty clever. What I really liked about that dude, that particular leader guy who was played by Obi, was that he really had that good philosophy of, on the one hand, dismissing the mythologies, not taking the mythologies as being true per se, having been a quote unquote learned man, but also having the wisdom to understand that just because a myth, it's not a ghost or a sky god, that doesn't mean that there's not some information in that myth that may be relevant. Could be, could not be, but like they're not eating the fruits or something like that. It's like, yeah, maybe you won't get cursed by God, but maybe there's some other reason why people are like, don't eat those fruits. Now, in this case, we happen to have seen the story, so we know the deal, but I thought that his attitude was a pretty, considering how quote unquote early in their civilization they were, I thought it was a pretty solid perspective to have. And then it was funny that he made that. Was it weird that he made that old white guy come out?
He started doing dictation for him,
and then just have him write a letter.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm pretty sure you look like you got a good head on your shoulders. I'm pretty sure you can write that letter yourself. You just had him come out, write the letter, and stick it in.
He crawled up out of some castle, up a rocky hill.
He's like, I'm an old man. You made me come out to this crazy place where all the druids used to hang out.
He was making fun of him because he fell down during the ground quake.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Some of us stumbled.
Yeah, that was interesting because it's like, it's happened where a leader has decided to go grasping at straws just to prove that they didn't fuck up in some sort of embarrassing scenario. So, maybe it was we know that that probably had nothing to do with it, or maybe it did, and I don't know. He actually, for whatever reason, he was reaching out to him, and the old guy who initially was like reprimanding him for believing in superstition. So it shows that the old guy is logical in some kind of sense. But then he points out how he won't eat the fire fruit or whatever, which, like you said, could have been because of it was poisonous or something.
That guy was in a 7-part Doctor Who episode in the year 1970. That old guy.
So that
old coot. He's an old coot.
So at the point though, the Protector says, "Prove me wrong," which that's not really a scientific sort of. You're not supposed to prove someone wrong. You're supposed to
prove yourself wrong,
right? But, and for good reason. One of which is it's usually impossible to prove a negative. Yeah. So I mean, but other than that, I mean, it showed that they were sort of growing. And
I think you've just provided a really good example of the quality of the writing in this episode. Mm-hmm. Is that they situated him in a very specific philosophical location, which was learned enough to have sort of a beginning understanding of fact versus myth and all that, and the beginnings of science, but not yet having the actual scientific method and having the logic that underpins that, because he was obviously still, like you said,
sort of like late medieval.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and then of course, I believe the next one was the telescope guys, right? That you were talking about. Mm-hmm. Which was another interesting
Art Deco steampunk.
Because as you said, as Jesse noted, each of these times are trying to communicate, and now what I really thought was cool about that telescope scene was I was really filled with awe when they showed that image of what Voyager looks like through the telescope.
Yeah,
and even though you understand that they've seen it for a while now, because obviously they had the telescope, you can understand the kind of like, you see this sky god that your culture has been talking about for fucking years. And then you get to look at it and you see it's just like, it's clearly some ship. It's some sort of a vessel of some sort.
It was all shiny.
It had to be amazing.
Shiny? Was there the atmosphere make it all shiny?
Yeah, I just thought, because the atmospheric, that was just, for me, shiny. That special effect was really cool. Yeah. I mean, it was with that blurriness, and it really seems like that's how Voyager would kind of look through an older telescope without any computer correction for the atmospheric turbulence and all that other good stuff.
So when it was 7 and 9, she goes, it's got increased level of carbon dioxide and ammonium, which means they've been making progress. I thought that was kind of an interesting observation. Yeah. Just sort of, if you want to break it down, like what progress looks like in terms of chemicals that are flying into the air.
They're starting to get heavy industry.
So, and they were way into iron because they had to support their building. So that's. It's kind of neat, and how that goes along with the message they kind of say at the end of just like, Voyager is the reason we made all this shit that we made now, and so and so everything is out of necessity. Think about all these things. Think about all the things that we haven't discovered. Not to like sort of be too self-congratulatory as a species, but imagine all the things that we didn't invent that we could have just because we didn't really need to. It's all crazy shit.
It's an interesting sort of discussion point, which is because they don't give you the answer in this episode. They don't agree with him point blank that's why they're like, okay, yeah, but maybe maybe if we left that would still do it. They were basically treading the line between, yes, Voyager had an effect, but on the other hand, you are clearly a clever, industrious people that have ingenuity, right? Mm-hmm. You did not necessarily need us to achieve this level of progress or to continue to progress. Now they don't really go down on either side, which I also kind of liked. I like that they leave it up to the audience to be kind of like wrestle around with your head exactly what the nature of this impact of Voyager being there.
Because it seems like maybe it's a quicker development than what would have happened on Earth. Because there was mention of 1,000 years, and if that was real or if it was actually longer than that. But I mean, if it going from 1,000 years of,
how long
from that primitive state to like some kind of late 20th century.
I mean, 1,000 years. I guess I don't know how long that would be in.
I mean, if they were all tribal and shamanistic, and then they went from that to some kind of late 20th century space travel, then that's quicker than what we did.
I think it is good. It's a good point to comment on an issue that I think Star Trek often has, and it's only an issue in the fact that it's when you're comparing reality to the purpose of fiction, right? Which is that they tend to perpetuate this idea that cultures and societies sort of advance on some sort of specific evolutionary path, which is not true. And
wait, I'm sorry. So I was calculating the time. 1,000 years, apparently, that's like 15 minutes or something like that.
Right.
So it seems like they would go on, but I missed the first part of what you were saying, which was were you saying that they're asserting that people progress in species and cultures goes along the same line, because they've done that in several different
and that's what I'm saying.
They often assume that in science fiction.
That's all we know.
This is a problem. It's not just in Star Trek. It's of course a problem in a lot of areas of fiction, especially science fiction. But Star Trek is so big and vast that it happens a lot, and it becomes, there's like this implicit view that societies and cultures develop on a very specific path, and like with a series of steps.
Now they're in the Age of Enlightenment.
And and the thing is that
too much playing Civilization and Age of Empires.
That makes perfect sense in terms of trying to create a relatable story. A story that the audience, a human audience, would be able to interpret and understand.
Well, it's like why they always go back to the 20th century or whatever.
It's a similar reason, but it has a slightly more nefarious effect, which is it is perpetuating a concept that is effectively a 19th century, largely racially driven concept of social evolution that has long been dismissed by actual anthropologists and sociologists, etc.
Well, I mean, at what level are the patterns? Do patterns hold though? At some point, there's probably some. No, well, there's probably some abstract pattern you can sort of draw from it.
But it's not that it's not worth studying, and of course you would ideally want to. I mean, I'm going to make 2 points here. First of all, there's what we know about humans. We already know that that's just not the case, just in terms of human history, and also there's a bias to saying, okay, this is how it happened with humans, so this is how it happens. And then in Star Trek, because again, they're trying to tell relatable stories, but they're now expanding this philosophy or this conceit onto all alien races, that they all go,
So I agree with you. It's definitely, it definitely seems like it's an oversimplification. It narrows the field a little bit too much. I'm wondering if on a broader level, if there's any kind of pattern, though, you might be able to, just from basic design evolution.
When we look at our own cultures, we do see that cultures do not go through. It's not every culture goes through a Reformation or a Renaissance.
Well, right,
or this and that.
That's just it's a very
industrial revolution. They don't all do it, and they don't all do it in the same order.
Right. And so I agree with you in that. That's a little too specific to say that this exact thing happens and it happens in this order.
And that's what they're doing. That's all I'm complaining about.
Yeah.
And in terms of a broader philosophical thing, the part of the problem with just saying like, oh, look at how far this culture has advanced. Like say we're in Star Trek and we're viewing a planet and we're talking about look how far they've advanced. That's colloquially, I don't have any problem with that phrase. But if you kind of dig into it a little bit, it's somewhat arbitrary by what you're measuring them on, right? Because some people would say, look how far they've advanced in terms of everyone's got health care or whatever, everyone's treated well,
Well,
versus look at they have the strongest weapons or can project their power the strongest or the
it
strongest
presumes like
economy.
what your goal is.
Well, that's always an important point. And in Star Trek and in other fiction, often we don't have, other than novels, I guess, you often don't have the space to really get into that. So me saying this is not a complaint, but I thought that this episode was kind of a good time to sort of bring up that little bugaboo I have about Star Trek in general, that they apply this philosophy because it's useful dramatically, but it can have the side effect of reifying in people's brains this idea is like, oh yeah, first you do this, then you do this. And the other thing, of course, in Star Trek, they have a tendency to homogenize these planets, and that's it's unavoidable. Again, we're not, it's not a season-long arc. It's not, a novel.
I mean,
where you can go into the
even, I mean,
details.
you're not talking about physically, but like but to say that even physically, that's due to a constraint, with, visual effects,
Well,
probably. But after a while, it becomes like this race is the one that looked like they took a thumb to their head,
Right.
Like,
They're just like humans, but they got a thumbprint on their head.
Yeah, with implied physiology differences from what the doctor says later, he's like, I learned all about their physiology. I know much about it as I do you. And I'm like, what do they have?
Apparently, had a kid.
It's like, do they have 5 lungs? Do they have gills in there somewhere? Like,
now again,
he had a kid too.
I guess he learned about the physiology.
I want to flip this around though, because I want to compliment Voyager, and I could be wrong here, and I would love to hear from you guys and from the fans if I'm off base here, but I feel that Voyager is the first Star Trek where they started really making a concerted effort to have people that are quote unquote an alien race, but with very different physical characteristics within that race, right? Mm-hmm. And for example, in the vignettes, especially the first 2 vignettes, you have people who have different skin tones, right?
Yeah.
And
there's an Asian-y guy and an African-y guy.
Yeah, and a whitey guy, a couple whitey people. Yeah. But the thing is I'm sure, I know they did it before. I'm not saying they didn't do it before on like TNG and Deep Space Nine, but I think it seems in Voyager, the more I watch, and the more I refresh my memory, is like they really seem to be making a point to be like, we want to cast diverse people. We are constrained by the fact that, we don't have the budget to make energy blobs and gloob glarps and fleeble flops.
Gloob glarbs.
We've got to have humans in.
That's what the doctor was worried about, being a big purple blob of protoplasm.
Yeah. And again, I could be totally off base on that, but I got that impression, and I think that's great. I think that they were making a subtle point to say, look, these stories can include everybody. Like, this alien race doesn't have to be all dark people, all light skinned people, all and even in terms of the makeup, and the clothing and stuff, I thought there was a little bit more variety.
That first round of people was kind of silly, a little bit silly. But
it was a little silly.
Yeah, I mean, what are you going to say? But other than like, I don't know about that. It's just like,
well,
how do you know? But at the same time,
it was more that they were dressed silly because they kind of they behaved relatively rationally.
Yeah.
Given it was just sort of hard to take them seriously when they were wearing those goofy hats.
Yeah, I think that's what
they were like hats made of sticks or something.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, it was some kind of.
I think actual ancient people were more creative.
They looked like they had a pom pom on their head or something like that. It was all they're all bristly, like an aspen. I know what aspen trees look like because in West Virginia I went on a nature hike and the dude was talking about aspen trees and they have flat stems and that's why they look like they quiver. So maybe they were wearing aspen leaves on their head except they were shaped like grass.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Or maybe they were pom pom. That old dude in the next stage. The other thing is that old dude in the next phase, who was the old guy in the Protector. He was talking about how he's the one who taught the Protector not to believe in superstition. So you're like, oh, this old dude's got it down. But then the guy's like, well, they might be causing the earthquakes. He's like, nah. And then he talks about like how the stars are unknowable. It's a mystery that will never be knowable. Yeah. So it's like, well,
like you said, they don't know. They're not there yet.
And then he's getting there, but like some shit.
But it seemed like at first that the old dude was going to be the one that was the teacher, but the Protector was going to have to be reminded. But then it's the Protector actually was forward thinking on that whole thing.
He started bossing the other guy around.
So maybe it's more like that old dude was, he was the forward thinker, and now it's moving on to the next guy, and that's showing.
I found it was an interesting decision that the people we saw were all in favor of not only communicating, but they were very curious about and protective of Voyager up in their sky. The people who start shooting back, we only hear from, or it's implied, right? So we hear from the Doctor that there are people that don't like it. We hear from some of the other characters, oh yeah, there's people who think it's evil. My grandpa says it's evil. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, eventually the planet starts shooting at them. So we know that at some point those people gain some sort of control, but we don't actually see or interact with those people.
Right.
Which was kind of an interesting choice to not really kind of stress on that.
Yeah, you're right. They did breeze over that because 1 minute everything's fine, the next minute they're firing, and Gotana Retz was going back to the planet, and he got like in touch with that grouchy weather person, like what was going on. I don't know why she was being so sassy with that guy,
but like all he had to do was land, and then everybody was like, "Oh, it's this guy." And that was just cranky air traffic control.
Yeah, and she's all like, "Oh, Gotana Retz, you're dead." You know, it's like, anyways. But at that conversation, he's looking for launch control. And she said that launch control became the tactical command center 50 years ago. So it was 50 years ago. Like you said, we don't actually go over it, but that was sort of the indication that something switched over. They're flying over it, and this sort of idea that it became the tactical command center is just got this sort of ominous vibe going on.
I didn't notice that. You're right. That is a clear change indicating whoever took control.
Yeah, but they don't have, but you're right, they don't actually approach the subject other than that grandfather giving, which is also could just be thought of as scaring your kids with something to make them behave or whatever. But they don't actually approach about the idea of like what draws, they didn't tackle that philosophical subject really. This was more of about
at the end they were just interested in destroying it because they were developing like all these weird advanced weapons just to get at the airship.
I guess they just wanted the earthquakes to stop.
Like antimatter weapons.
It was interesting that they also associated, a running theme is the association of Voyager with the earthquakes, which we are led to believe is in fact the case, right? That is what we are told.
Because they became a third pole of the planet somehow.
Yeah. So whatever the technobabble reason
somehow
is,
the tachyons and third pole made
there was some kind of
earthquakes.
tachyon involved.
Well, that's why their planet.
You gotta always brush them tachyons off when you're coming into the house.
That's why their
winter.
Planet was all fast, is because the tachyon field instead of a magnetic field, they had a tachyon
Shake them
field.
tachyons.
Shaking them tachyons.
But from the planet's perspective, right, that's still following the myth.
I used to have a house.
As far as I know, I don't know if I don't recall them ever saying, getting information where the scientists we have now determined that it is that thing causing the earthquakes. It could be in their more advanced stages, but again, we don't really see much from their advanced stages to know. But
in the second
it seemed
stage,
like they were. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Go ahead. I was just gonna say in the second stage, they just assumed that it was related because of the myth, and then the question was, well, that's just a myth, and well, I think it's related, but they didn't.
It was like even though they were calling it ground shaker, but then they were like, well, that could just be a myth, so that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Just because we're calling it ground shaker, it doesn't.
The telescope people,
was sort of interesting.
Telescope people seem to assume it is, but then they're saying, the guy, the main Australian. G'day, mate. I've got a telescope covered in marmite. He says, well, they're not shaking the planet on purpose.
Yeah, he said they would have killed us if they can hang up there for a while. They could kill us if they wanted to. Well, some sites called it the ground shaker, which would be probably the sort of the negative vibe. But then there was also Lightbringer. Other people brought it Lightbringer.
That's the happy thing.
So that's where you can, I guess, decide like which side of that coin.
Like even the doctor came back and he was like, "You guys were always up there, and I was staring up at you guys, and you were always in the sky." And it's like,
he gave her that awkward hug when he got out of it. That was really.
Can we talk about the doctor's adventure?
Oh my god!
Here? Okay, so
this guy got busy.
First thing, again, I haven't seen this episode in 15 years or something, which is a shame because it's a great episode, but.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I really, in my memory, I thought the Doctor was on that planet for like 900 years or something. But because I remember the recent, there was an Orville episode called Mad Idolatry, and it's a great episode, and it's totally worth watching. It's a good companion episode to this one.
Yeah.
And it's a very similar concept where time moves much faster on the planet.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good episode.
One of the crew members accidentally messes with the culture, and becomes seen as a god in that culture, and they end up sending Isaac, their android robot artificial person, down to the planet. He stays there for 700 years, And I don't know if that messed with my memory, because I remember watching that episode and very much enjoying it, but then thinking of Blink of an Eye and saying this is the same story. But it is a very similar tale. But the Doctor was only down there for, what did they say, 3 years?
He said it was like 3 years.
He said it was 3. He said it was 3 years.
It was like a minute or something they lost.
Well, I feel like wasn't there a Voyager episode or something where a planet does phase out and then phases back in.
There's a Deep Space Nine episode.
It's Deep Space Nine where that happens. Okay, so maybe,
but that's different.
Yeah, I know it's a different concept, but when it phases out, doesn't it pass to like many years when it phases in back from the old
No,
thing?
I think from their perspective, time goes by.
That one's fucked up.
You just don't have access to them. I think. I think time is still going normal on that.
Okay,
I could be wrong
on both sides.
I think so.
We didn't talk about that one, did we?
No.
I just watched that one recently. That one's effed up. We should watch that.
Yeah, it is one. Yeah, that one is super fucked up.
So,
my man.
Wait, what were we just talking about? We're talking about
Star Trek,
Battlestar Galactica.
No, but I mean specifically.
Leave it to Beaver.
Oh yeah, he was over there for 3 years. In which case,
too close for comfort.
What happened to? Okay, first of all, when he goes, he's been here for years. B'Elanna's all like, years?
B'Elanna, you can do math. You know the deal.
Right. Yeah.
You know how long it worked.
Isn't she like the engineer or something?
Yeah.
I love the fact that when they were trying to find him, they were all like, are there any opera houses?
Yeah. It's like, oh.
They're like, he's totally the type who would be hanging out at the opera house. They're like, you're right. He's right there.
Yeah. So he's into opera and Crusher is into dance and theater. So all these doctors have an artistic side to them, it seems.
What was
like.
Dr. Pulaski into?
She was into being a bitch.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, I like Dr. Pulaski. I like Dr. Crusher better.
No, she was cool, but yeah, she was so
was
mean.
ornery.
She was so mean to Data.
Yeah,
they were trying to recreate a McCoy type character.
Yeah, McCoy wouldn't have been that mean. He's a nice guy.
There was something endearing, like loving in his voice when he said it. Like you could tell she just hated Data. So he transports him for 3 years. He's super happy to be back. And then he gives Janeway that weird hug, and then
she taps him on the head.
She tapped him on the head.
She did that weird thing where
when he had to get cosmetic surgery when he came back.
Yeah, she was like, you gotta get that fixed.
Oh yeah.
And she all like pokes him on his head hole.
That was silly and fun, but yeah.
And then he did a weird thing where he touched his head with 2 fingers all close together, which I think Robert Picardo did a lot. I think he did a lot of this 2-finger.
So when B'Elanna was saying that you need some cosmetic surgery, I'm assuming she was joking, and really she's just twisting some configuration knobs. He is still a hologram, right? But he can have a kid. And
because if you think
he can abandon a child. I want to talk about that.
Yeah, so
because if you're in a holodeck program and you're having sex with a hologram, then there's got to be some sort of sub there's a firmness. So he can.
Well, there's a firmness in plastic.
He's not just the hologram that you can pass through. Like he was able to have.
Yeah, but he was able to have something that produces a child.
That is fucked up.
No, he said it's a long story. I don't know.
I know.
He must have adopted some kid.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Or he did some sort of maniacal medical experimentation.
But then it was just when B'Elanna made what I'm assuming is a joke about cosmetic surgery. Like those two things combined, I'm just thinking, is this guy like did I forget about something? This is season 6.
He has the hollow emitter. That's the main.
Right. That's
the main
what
thing.
I
Is he has
remember.
that portable hollow emitter at this stage so that he can wander around. Which was
it's like in Red Dwarf when there's they turn off the hologram and it's like this little capsule.
He can be all
Red Dwarf.
I remember the episode when they went to the planet and everyone did everything backwards.
That's the only episode I remember.
Yeah, it's like seriously. And then I remember Lister was like, "Well, Lister looks cool."
But abandoning the child thing is that's no joke, right? Because so I know this is a 43-minute of content.
Okay, I would like to say that I was meant to mention that I thought this could be a two-parter. This one could have been a two-parter.
It was
first half and second half easily on that.
It was something that could have been stretched out, although it could have had the same problem I think we saw with Year of Hell, which is again a brilliant episode, a brilliant two-parter. But there does appear to be a little bit of padding in there. It's more like a 1.5-parter. Some of these concepts are sort of 1.5-parters. I think sometimes they bias themselves towards doing a 2-part. Sometimes they bias themselves to squishing it into 1 part.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of like that.
Year of Hell, though, they tried to introduce these different sort of ideas without fleshing them out. So they sort of did a halfway thing where they couldn't decide between picking 1 or 2 subjects and fleshing them out, or picking 10 things and just hitting on them.
And again, with that, as we discussed it, in all likelihood is based on the fact that it was originally envisioned to be a full season.
Yeah.
And then they're really picking and choosing, and they're just trying to scramble it all into a two-parter. So it worked out very well.
But the doctor leaving Marisa, and he didn't seem bummed about any
just
of
being
it.
beamed away.
Yeah.
And then asking Daniel Day Kim's character to look up his dead son
Yeah.
without any, like, it was like...
He's probably dead by now.
yeah.
they were talking about baseball or something.
Yeah.
He named him a weird name.
Or some sport. I guess it wasn't baseball. It was
Some
some
baseball
alien
analog.
sport.
He shouldn't have named the kid Jason because he's not supposed to make contact.
Jason,
and
that's an unusual
And if you give a kid a name like Jason, what if suddenly they start naming everyone Jason? You would have had an effect on the planet. I know it's not a big deal considering everything that's happened, but I think that was more for the audience than anything else.
This is a good point for us to discuss the Prime Directive.
After these messages,
This episode is sponsored by Barble Narves.
put it in
Barble
your
Narves.
pickle juice.
Put it in your pickle juice. Just add Barble Narves to your pickle juice. Go to www.barblenarves.com.
You won't believe the result.
Add
won't believe the
Barble Narves
bleeds
to everything. Add
on the
Barble
Sneeble
Narves to
bleeds.
your rectal prolapse medication. I don't know if there's
I don't
medication
have
for
a
that.
prolapsed anus.
It's probably an ointment. I don't know. Ointment counts as medication.
It does, yeah.
We're really good at coming up with commercials on the fly.
We just improvise that. I know the audience is going to be like, "What?"
What just happened?
nothing.
Am I still listening to the It's Got Star Trek podcast?
Somebody help, honey! Come over here. I think I'm losing my mind.
Did you put the Blarble Narvels in it?
Blarbalars.
Oopsie.
Put them in your fleebs.
www.blarblenars.net.
Oh my goodness. So Marisa and the child,
And we're back.
So he Prime Directive, okay?
Prime Directive.
There's a lot we can discuss here. But I think the child abandonment, naming the child Jason, even worse, we are giving the doctor the benefit of the doubt and assuming that when he said he had a child, he means that he met a local barmaid or young aspiring
already
soprano.
had a child
and she had a child from an abusive relationship and she helped her get out of it. And then they grew close. And then he got married and he raised this child as his own
And they wrote
for a
songs
couple
together.
years. For a couple years. That's the weird thing about having a child and only being there for 3 years, because we're presuming he didn't like shack up with a chick straight away. Maybe he did, but presuming there's some buffer time.
I bet you he did.
He knew this kid all of what, 2.5 years, and then left. And in his mind, he's like, I had a child. He was my boy.
Yeah, and he goes, one needs companionship. And all Janeway said is, you'll get no argument from me. That was her whole responsible thing after she told him not to fucking, make contact, you know? But her thing is that she was like, was that an admission because, was that a throwback to, like, I think it was the episode, was it Resolutions, where her and Chakotay lived on a planet for a while together?
Yeah.
And it's implied that they get close.
I bet they did.
They get close physically.
Janeway knows
romantically.
the benefit of regular access to orgasms.
Yeah, and so
As should you all.
She's the captain.
But like, you know, what's the
Tom Paris.
what's the origin of that belief?
gotta be good for something.
It's like those.
The origin of the belief that access to regular orgasms is a net positive in your life?
What? I'm just no. Don't twist that one around. It's like
It's
why?
from Starfleet. It's in the manual.
Or do you mean why she's so forgiving for the doctor?
Yeah, I was more going towards in that direction.
Well, okay.
So it's basically she is admitting that. Because, like, that episode on where her and Chakotay were on the planet together, they never outright said that anything happened. But it's easy to assume as such.
I think so.
So this is kind of like a callback to
think
that,
so.
basically saying, like, hey.
I think it's a generalized callback to the Chakotay thing, general callback to just her enjoying herself.
Yeah, what happens in space stays in space.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I mean, not everyone-
she's got a big ready room.
I mean, just because
she's got her lucky teacup.
I mean, just because you love.
I don't know how that factors.
Just
in.
because
Got
you.
a big ready room.
Just because you understand that
Tiny little
orgasms are good, it doesn't mean like you go around saying, you know, oh, it's okay that you did all this shit.
Oh no, I totally agree. I'm clearly just.
Yeah.
Okay, this comes up a lot on Voyager, it comes up a lot on Star Trek in general, these debates about the Prime Directive and whether they're following it or not following it, or when they break it, do they break it for a good reason or not? Voyager, I think there are some episodes where Janeway is simply more cavalier. She has some justification because they are, in fact, trying to get home. The more pure Star Trek perspective would be, well, you would never willfully break the Prime Directive, even to get home. And they make that decision oftentimes. In fact, it is a complaint some people have that, I mean, starting at Caretaker, Janeway, refuses to do things. She doesn't do the Battlestar Galactica style, I'll do anything to get home thing. She's like, no, we still have to live up to our ideals. There are other times where she's a little bit looser with the ideals. In this case, I'm guessing the justification, and anyone could debate whether it is a true justification or not, but I guess the justification is, we already fucked it up. So whatever.
Yeah, well, there was a good discussion about the Prime Directive earlier. That was back when the what's it called? The telescope dudes. They transmitted.
Yeah, that's the name of it.
Yeah, the telescope dudes. That was the third one. They had that whole line of action figures.
I'm Janky, and I'm Janky, and we're the telescope dudes.
Skyship Friends,
which was interesting because the Skyship Friends they were kind of deities, but then they turned into action figures. Now I'm sure there's
were they action figures or were they like stuffed animals?
I think they were action.
I think they were action figures, and
he talked about like playing around with them.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if whatever, it doesn't matter, but it was fun. It was a fun touch, but fun touch.
I wonder if they had a version of Magic the Gathering, but where the Skyship was a hero card.
That's why I didn't go too far into that line, because I was assuming
you get mad at that one friend of yours who ordered it online.
Well, look, if you
Black Lotus. It's like their version of the Black Lotus is the
Black
Skyship.
I'm sure there's Jesus action figures or whatever, but it's not celebrated like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and that's what it seemed like. Skyship Friends were like Ninja Turtles.
But in a way, I mean, ancient Greek mythology, Thor, Loki, right?
Yeah.
Egyptian mythology, I mean, Stargate, Ra and all that.
Yeah, but
I think that's the better analogy as opposed to the monotheistic.
Yeah, but their belief system, like, no, there's not many people who believe in like Thor and all that shit. It's more just stories. Whereas way back in the day, maybe more people believed in it. But now this is their only religion.
But what I was taking that as a signifier that they weren't taking it as seriously. I thought that the fact that he had toys and the other guy was like, my grandpa wouldn't let me play with these toys or whatever.
Right, because it become a fairy tale by that point.
Exactly.
He was talking about how like there's an evil guy up in the skyship.
Yeah, and that's why and again they seem to have maintained through, like, even when they were the more sort of theological religious style, they still seem to maintain some sort of polytheism in the sense that they thought this was one of many.
Right,
it might be the one that's currently disrupting their lives, but that there are all these other stars and stuff out there, and that they were clearly other versions of this. They were just far enough away that they weren't bothering.
It's Western polytheism.
So
versus Eastern monotheism.
So, were you going to say something, Patrick?
No, and that was the one minor other point I was going to make, is that it would be more problematic if it was a true monotheistic religion, because the monotheistic religions, and again, this is an example of where we get sort of we sometimes skew our viewing when we're thinking about it a certain way. The monotheistic religion tends to be patriarchal and sort of top-down hierarchical, whereas the polytheistic religions and certainly what they displayed in this show was less about being hierarchical. Remember, a couple of those leaders were straight up like, yeah, let's try to talk to this guy. And at the minimum, they were thinking of themselves like on the same level or at a close level, close enough to. They weren't thinking of it as the all-knowing, ununderstandable thing, right?
Right.
That old guy was, but that old guy.
Yeah, exactly. But even he was like, he was more saying don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Not like, ooh, let's cower in front of it. It was more like, fuck it, it's just some shit in the sky.
Yeah.
So those guys made that UHF signal, right? They transmitted that to.
It's a very good movie by Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome.
Michael Richardson, long before he ruined his career being a fucking moron.
Yeah,
having bad views on things.
So 7 of 9, she was familiar with.
He's got a twisted sense of humor.
So 7 of 9 was familiar with UHF, but she was not familiar with AM because she was all talking about. She recognized the transmission as an ultra high frequency.
Amplitude modulation.
Ultra high frequency. And then she was like saying the modulation was unfamiliar. And then that's when Chakotay had to point out, it's like, oh, it's amplitude modulation. And it's a radio transmission.
Maybe the Borg never assimilated anybody with that had amplitude modulation.
Well, why did she know about ultra high frequency?
Well, they must have assimilated somebody with ultra high frequency.
Like with FM or something.
Seems like if you have
X-rays.
if you have frequency modulation, you're going to intuit amplitude modulation.
I tend to agree.
See, that's assuming that they follow the same course of evolution.
Yeah, so
No,
like,
it's just math there.
that's the thing is like while I firmly support all my previous statements about the nature, the not random, but the kind of complex and very difficult to map out and predict nature of societal evolution over time. I do tend to agree that if you know what a fucking radio is, you probably know about AM.
Yeah.
You probably have some hint about it. I mean, you'd expect the Borg to. I mean, come on,
sort of
Borg.
basis radio.
Come on, 7 of 9.
Yeah,
what's up?
the Borg should know like every motherfucking thing. They're super internet because they have the internet of people, of just like people are their
Exactly,
computers,
right.
you know?
That's the ultimate crowdsourcing.
They got
is
the
the
people
Borg.
that.
So so radio and I hadn't actually actively thought about this, but radio was radio communication was
Radio Gaga by Queen.
was obsolete by then. I guess it's all through subspace now. But there's got to be times where people don't communicate through subspace. Is it all just Wi-Fi then? Who knows?
Well, I mean that question actually comes up a lot in the real world study of extraterrestrial intelligence. You know, the SETI
Like
style.
cell-
Because the original plan, the original idea was we're releasing radio waves and television. You know, broadcast waves across television, radio, and other frequencies. Many of those are going out into space. Many of them aren't, by the way. They just get reflected back. But of the ones that of the ones that do, they're out there and spreading out. Now, a couple problems with that. First of all, radio waves spread out, you know, according to the normal mathematical thing, and they shift and they get harder to detect the further away you get, right? That's one potential issue with radio waves. The other thing is, and they've tried to figure out ways around this at SETI, the radio waves are going to go down because now most of the communication on the planet, which is primarily through the internet, is all going through cables under the ocean and through wires across the planet. There's a common misconception. A lot of people think like, oh, it's satellites or something. Not much internet traffic is going up and down to satellites. Most of it's on the planet. So that information is effectively closed off in terms of what's going on the real world. And the same thing is true of broadcast frequencies. Those have mostly been taken over. We're not broadcasting entertainment out there. They've been taken over by governments and other things as we've moved to digital formats and straight beam communications and 5G and stuff like that. So now we have to think, well, what are we going to look for? Because if another culture has the premise is that we figure they would reach some sort of level of technology where they would figure out AM waves, even though the Borg didn't, and then we could detect that. But now we're realizing, actually, because of the time differential, we're not probably not evolving at the same amount of time and not in the same direction and all that. So they might be using something different, like lasers, right? Or they could use some sort of graviton pulses or something. We don't know. So we have to kind of look at other things other than radio.
Well, we have to. The radio still has a use because it's analog. And if all else fails, you can get a radio signal. You can just pull it out. You can pull it out of the air. And so it would seem like what could they communicate on in the future as an alternative to radio that was going to be as reliable as, you know? Yes, there's a lot of problems with radio, like you said, about degradation.
All I'm saying is it is a real world fact that they've now understood that it's not like culture X on planet Y is going to develop radio and then just be broadcasting radio for thousands of years,
right,
and that we might happen to catch it because of the time difference in terms of it coming here and when they actually develop radio. What's more likely to happen is if you've got some alien culture on a different planet and it's 100 light years away and they broadcast radio for like 150 years, but they did that 200 years ago, we would never know. Because now the amount of radio broadcasts that are actually leaving that planet's atmosphere and are detectable have now been reduced so low that it's unlikely for us to actually catch them. As opposed to that block of time, that like 50 years where we were blasting shit out into space, but then now it's starting to go down because everyone's got cable TV and whatnot. We just don't need to blast that stuff out into the air as much.
So I guess that the planet like would have no need to. You're just saying that the planet like would have no reason to blast out radio waves to space if they were more evolved. Is what you were saying.
Not even more. I wouldn't use the term more evolved. It's just that they're using a different technology. I would say the way to look at it is there are some technologies that are detectable from far away, and some that are not. And when those are being used at any given time, that's important to think about. That, you know what, they might be using a technology that is not something that we can easily detect, and they might not be pointing it at us.
I think I was more just pointing out that Chakotay was talking about how nobody uses radio anymore.
I want to point out that I think Chakotay is sticking his nose where it doesn't belong a lot in this episode.
Because what?
I found him slightly annoying. I don't know, in his scenes. I don't know. I respect that if I'm being an asshole about that, but like, I don't know, something about Chakotay this
Tom
episode.
Guy is like always annoying.
The Tom guy was impulsive. Oh yeah, the reason I brought this up was that, so it kind of just goes to your point about how, well, anyways, obviously they wouldn't know if they had a call return, but the way Voyager framed it is that this message with all the numbers and the voice was the first time they got this message.
Yes.
Whereas on the planet, the telescope guys were saying like, we've been sending messages. Now obviously they're never going to find out, but you'd think one of them would have made it to Voyager.
It's compressed time.
But,
I think what we were seeing in Voyager is the entire time that project existed.
Well,
compressed into a few minutes.
Right.
Yeah, right. So maybe it was all bunched up
it's
together.
It's inelegant because of the TV convention that we can't see both things at the same time.
That makes sense though. That like if they were sending them over the course of 10 years or 20 years, it would be to them. It wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be that long. Anyway, okay, so
they were a little inconsistent with the time stuff, I got to say, because they even gave us that specific, what was it, like 50 days?
One second is approximately 1 day.
Yeah, something like that, right?
Yeah.
But then when you actually do the calculations on some of these things, I think it doesn't quite match up.
It seemed like it kept changing. Was that because they were getting closer to the planet? Or
they didn't provide it.
Well, they were.
It wasn't really clear.
They were talking about how the that satellite they sent in orbit had been. It was starting to die because it had been there.
It'd been out there,
for 200 years because its orbit was decaying, and so the closer it was getting, the longer it was.
But you didn't get that. That was an example because you kind of don't get the impression that they're actually watching the probe for that long. Like, it seems more like it's a couple minutes.
Yeah, but they said it was 200 years.
I know that's what they said, but another example that jumped out at me was when the doctor was talking to Daniel Day Kim and saying, basically talking about the fans, and Daniel Day Kim says like, yeah, he's the grandson of that guy you're talking about.
Yeah, that seemed,
and that didn't make sense with the amount of time that passed since the doctor got back.
Right, it didn't make sense.
Versus Daniel Day Kim. I know it's dramatic license.
But I was thinking about that too. How it's just like they don't tell you how much time has passed on the ship between scenes, but you gotta assume that it's, it's like every, what did I say? It takes a thousand, 16, I don't know what it was. It was, if you take 1,000 seconds, if you count 1,000 years times, I don't remember how I calculated this. I don't think I calculated this at all. This is the easiest fucking math.
You're just reading numbers.
So
it's 1,000, 1,000 island dressing.
So if you have 60 seconds, 60 minutes, right?
You want to make a lot of money, you should start selling 2,000 miles.
So in one day,
all the fancy suburbanites will buy that shit up.
In one day,
extra tangy.
In one day,
with
there's
some bleed blocks in it. Pickles it right up.
If in one day,
pickle juice.
In 60 seconds, 60 seconds.
Your durations keep changing here.
Dan is furiously tapping into.
I can't believe I can't. I'm really bad right now. I'm supposed to.
Dan this is particularly. He's feeling pressure because he's really good at math.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
No,
really good at math.
At least relative to this group, I suspect that he is probably the
most mathematical.
The adept at the math.
I'm trying to concentrate on doing this, but also be active in the conversation, and I think it's stressing me out.
I think it is. I think you look pretty stressed. I felt scratching.
Yeah. So 60.
He's getting hives.
So there's 3,600 seconds in a hour, and then you multiply that by 24. You get 86,400 seconds in a day, right? So that's 86,400 days. You divide that by 365. In one day, there's 237. It's probably around 235 to 240 years for a day.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
it's hard to tell because we can't really tell how long they're dealing with this. And some of that, I think, is, hearkening back to the slower pace of these television programs. But I couldn't tell you if they were dealing with this for less than a day and this was all resolved in one day, or was it
because all Janeway was like, we just got here. She was like, we just got here.
Yeah, when she said that, I was like,
well, yeah, we know you. Like, how long
then
have you been there? Been there a day?
Chakotay's like, we've done enough to them over the last 1,000 years, which is a loaded statement because he's representing a fake indigenous nations race. But that aside, it's also okay. That means they've been there for 4 days at least, right? So is it 4 days? Is it 1 day? Like they give us clues. It's not very. They don't really put it out there, which is fine. Again, it's a sci-fi. It's a cool sci-fi story, but that's our job as Star Trek nerds is to pull out the calculator and figure this shit out.
Did they tell the Starfleet High Command about this incident when they got back? because they would have just exploded. Well, their brains would have exploded with this, like the violation of the Prime Directive and like this insidious like 1,000
So when they got back, was it in their report?
It's like we snuck next to a planet and they built a whole mythology around us and they were writing fucking songs about us and they had fucking toys based on us.
Well, that already happened.
It was like Star Wars and Christmas combined.
That was like already happened in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, the second one or whatever. I think didn't they like influence some planet? Except they didn't do it through time. They just went to an old planet and. So Chakotay, but it was interesting. Well, first of all, the Doctor learned about this other, species of humanoid life. So he'll probably report that, right? And then Chakotay was sneaky, and every 10 milliseconds or something, or 10,000. Yeah. He was in something he measured in the milliseconds.
I don't think he's a very good anthropologist.
He said he just says take a snapshot of the planet every 10. So like he was putting together some kind of.
I didn't like. There was something about his attitude I didn't like. His methodology was sound. It was like, all right, we can take aerial photos of these people. Great, that's sound. So I really, it's difficult to describe because it's all in the performance. It's something it was like, this will help my career.
Yeah, that was
it was a little bit odd, and it wasn't even.
It was very self-serving. It wasn't
what career? You're trapped in the fucking Delta Corps.
I think it's just to remind us that they're Maquis and they only care about themselves.
Yeah. No, I wish it was that clever because it's not even like normal Chakotay style. I don't know. It was just something a little off about.
Yeah, that was actually
about that. Not that it wasn't a big deal. It was just kind of funny.
Cardassians aren't that bad. Jeez.
So, let's see. He
you're like pro Cardassian, anti Maquis now. There was a question on Facebook where somebody
Spoonies
said
ain't that bad.
Or it was on Facebook or Twitter, and somebody said, what would you be a part of, the Maquis, the Dominion, or Starfleet? And I responded with the It's Got Star Trek Twitter handle at It's Got Star Trek. I responded that the romantic side of me would want to say I'd be in the Maquis, but the practical side of me would be like,
I'm in the Dominion.
I'm going to be in Starfleet, and I want to get some like nice little side job in the science department, just sort of like go watch movies on 10 Forward, and hang out and just not get too involved.
Because if you're just a science guy on the ship,
get those replicator rations.
You're just doing all kinds of cool ass experiments with like technology, and you're flying around in space, and you can go to the replicator, you go to the holodeck, you go to watch some movies.
And fuck the Dominion. I don't want to be part of the Dominion.
Yeah, they're pretty fucked up actually.
Oh, gloopy.
So it was an interesting choice that the writers decided to add in the little part of him sort of observing this planet, and they didn't go anywhere with it. Not that they really needed to, but it was just kind of like they just mentioned it briefly.
There were a few drop things. I mean, even the Dr. Child thing was kind of a dropped thing as well. They added it in, and then they kind of dropped it because he didn't find out anything about the kid when Daniel Day Kim's character came back. They didn't say, here, I transferred some information about your growing family. Now it turns out that Jason had like 10,000 descendants or something.
It was actually more relevant when they talked about, mountainside or lakeside, because that was showing some kind of, allegiance to some like local culture there. That at least had some relevance in that sense. It's like, they were on the planet.
Though it also homogenized the planet because they talked about 26 states, and I guess they both happen to be in neighboring states or right, at least along the same lake.
Yeah, Chakotay learned about it was the Central Protectorate is where they were. I guess that's where the Protector is. And that's actually that's where the shit all went down, because the whole episode was they kept having shots from that one perspective of the mountain
where the altar was.
Yeah, and that was pretty cool. I thought
that was great.
But so it's the Central Protectorate, and which is a subcontinent in the southern hemisphere. The planet has 26 states. So
they got big ones.
They got big states, and
you like the big states.
Big ones.
There was a subcontinent. It didn't say how many subcontinents there were.
In Star Trek, they use any excuse to use the term subcontinent.
Which
doesn't fucking mean anything.
It hardly means anything.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that's getting into some sort of plate tectonics and like.
And it's kind of, I think it has a little bit of an imperial edge. The Indian subcontinent.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's the only subcontinent I know.
I think it merely to confine people into a category. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's the case.
When they did count an imprecise 1, 2, 3 when they were going to bring him back. They transported him down. Then B'Elanna was like, 1?
They didn't do a Mississippi
2?
or a 1 potato, 2 potato, or
And 3. They did the obvious pause at the end too.
right.
You know?
Yeah, Miles O'Brien would never have made
I
that.
know.
mistake.
Yes, he-
Over
Nor
in
would
Transporter Room
Scotty.
3. Yeah.
Miles is sitting there going 1 potato, 2 potato.
I mean, that was obviously for the audience because otherwise they would have just had it done on the computer anyways. They wouldn't have had someone counting on the side to when to bring him back, considering a fucking second is a day. Now, he was stuck in transport. You could see the
we'll
outline
get
of
the
his...
captain to count it. That'll make it better.
We saw the his outline in the transporter when they couldn't bring him back. And so he was stuck there for several seconds. Does that mean he was on the planet being all bobbled out for like a few days?
Probably, yeah.
You know, just like walking
Yeah.
around being like, what the fuck?
Hell
And everyone's
yeah.
like, what's wrong with you?
That's a keen observation. I bet. Yeah. Well, I guess it depends where they beamed him down too, because I guess they probably beamed him down out in the fucking woods or.
Yeah.
He was out in the middle of the subcontinent.
But like he's basically he was basically stuck in the transporter buffer for 3 days or something, at least halfway stuck. I'm sure part of him was out there.
that just would never have happened with O'Brien.
No,
Like-
in transporter room 3.
Yeah.
So all the stuff with the UHF guys beaming it up. That was booming it up. We were talking.
Hey, boom it up.
We were talking about.
boys! It's summer 2020. Boom it up.
We were talking about.
MTV rocks.
That's
Does
Polly.
MTV still exist?
Pauly Shore was a
In a form.
a video a VJ, a
Pauly
video
Shore, yeah.
a video jockey.
Did you say Polly Sheen?
I don't
Pauly
know what I
Shore.
said. I'm pretty sure I said Pauly. I could
You
have
probably
you said
did.
Pauly
In my
Shore.
brain, it said Polly Sheen, but maybe that's it.
originally it was gonna be
Polyethylene.
oh, what's his fucking name? I'm forgetting everything. Winter, who played Bill.
Oh, Alex.
Alex Winter. I was like saying,
Alex Winter.
yeah, I kept wanting to say Jonathan Winters, which is someone totally different.
Who's
That guy's
also great.
directed-
Jonathan
he's directed
Winters
several
rules.
movies. Right?
Yeah, he's into some he's into some cool shit. He made some movie about Napster.
Party on, man.
But anyway, so originally Alex Winter was going to be a VJ, but he turned it down because they wanted him to do it as Bill S. Preston.
yeah.
He's like, I'm not going to do that.
right.
And then they got Pauly Shore, so you know,
Right.
Pauly
And Pauly
Shore.
Shore had made no bones about being a fool on TV.
No,
He's
no.
like, I'll do whatever you guys
Or
want.
in the movies.
Yeah, would he have gotten to the movies without that VJ role? Probably not.
No.
No. I
also-
got a boogie on my finger
It
and I
helped that
can't shake it off.
his mom like ran the Comedy Factory. Right?
Oh, did she? So, the this was because I was talking about the Prime Directive. I don't
Prime
know.
Directive.
I don't know.
Prime Ribbit. Ruth's Chris.
Oh, that's right. Because you were going crazy for a second.
yeah.
We were talking about the Prime Directive, and so the UHF conversation when the guy was like, "Hey, help us, we're down here, stop fucking shit up." You know, they had the meeting, and that's when they actually had a pretty good discussion about the Prime Directive, because Tuvok was saying like, "We don't want to break the Prime Directive," and then
Paris.
thank you. Jesus. Paris was saying, you know, like, well, we've already broken the Prime Directive, so what's at this point, what's the difference? Interestingly enough, I tend to lean towards. Initially, I leaned towards like Paris, but then over the course of the episode, Paris was just being really impulsive.
Yeah.
Like,
if you think about it,
at another point, Paris was like, "We should fire back," and then Chakotay was like, "No, we fucked him up too much already."
Yeah.
He kept like
Which is a good point.
So on the one hand, Paris like wants to help them by not fucking with the Prime, or he wants to break the Prime Directive in order to help them. But then when they're shooting at him, he's like, "Fuck these guys, let's fucking blow them up." So I can only think he's just kind of thinking impulsively.
exactly. Yeah.
So
He's Tom Paris.
and so too- and-
he's an obnoxious little guy.
yeah, he is. And so Tuvok makes an interesting point of
He's
like,
no Harry Kim.
we have broken the Prime Directive. Like, there's no reason we should break it more. But at the
Yes.
same time, like, when you broke the Prime Directive, you caused the problems. If you break the Prime Directive and cause problems, is it your responsibility to undo those, or is it best just to leave it alone? And of course, a lot of Star Trek kind of, I can't think of the episode, but we actually watched, I think, an episode. Maybe it was past tense or something. I don't know. But actually, past tense did bring that up really well. Of like, what do you do when you fuck something up really bad in a place where you weren't supposed to fuck it up? This case, it was time in past tense. Here is a Prime Directive in this episode.
Yeah.
So do you fix it, or do you say like, no, Prime Directive, there's no fixing it. If you fuck it up, you just gotta back off no matter what. I don't know.
It's an example of why the Prime Directive is not an easy question to answer. It's not a question, so I sound like a fool having just made that statement. It is not an easy thing to address.
It's not always something that you can apply practically in every situation all the time.
So consider this situation. If we were to take Tuvok to the extreme view, the correct answer would have been for the Voyager to blow itself up. They're causing earthquakes. They already know they've affected the culture. They know that they know that they're a problem and they want to escape. But then if you are going to truly adhere to the Prime Directive or at least try to adhere best to the Prime Directive and you have no options, presumably you would blow yourself up to eliminate yourself as a threat. Yeah. Right?
The needs of the many versus the
Tom
needs
Paris,
of the few.
on the other hand, was more in not so much protecting the people mode. He wanted to get out of there. And he was looking at it from the perspective, how are we going to solve our problem? One way to solve the problem, we want to help these people, so let's just go talk to them. And then, by the way, maybe while we're down there, we can get some info. And when they start shooting at him, he's like perfectly happy to be like, let's just fucking shoot back. Fuck those people up, then they won't bother us anymore.
So he wasn't being so charitable by wanting to help them. He really just had his own.
I think it's certainly one interpretation. And I want to point out that, again, I know many people in the audience will not have seen the Orville episode, but just as a point of comparison, one of the key differences between that episode and this episode is that in this episode, it's not just the sci-fi concept of the differential time and sort of thinking about issues about consequences and cultural, cultural influence and all that. It does that very well. But it's also that the Voyager is in danger. Whereas in the Orville is not in danger as a ship. Kelly goes down. She's the second in command. She goes down, she realizes that she inadvertently influenced this culture. And all their efforts then are trying to correct that mistake, even though they're in no particular danger themselves, as I recall, which I do think is an important point. I mean, it makes the Orville perspective almost more noble in the sense that they are taking risks for the purpose of trying to correct the mistake they made. The other thing is that I don't know if it's that different necessarily because, again, they don't stress it too much in this episode, but in the Orville, when they send Isaac, the robot, down, and he lives there for 700 years, and when he gets back, the culture is much more advanced, and he comes back with two representatives from their culture. And the lesson of that is, yeah, you know what? It kind of sucks that Kelly came down and influenced their culture, but the ultimate lesson was it didn't matter. They still evolved to a level of technological advancement and philosophical advancement in that they became a peaceful people focused on science and learning and taking care of each other, and that they didn't need Isaac to help them. Isaac observed that, but they didn't need his help. That they got there in the end. And the implication in that episode was, yeah, Kelly happened to be the person who became the deity in their culture for a while, but that the structures of the culture that allowed that to happen already existed. And if it wasn't Kelly, it would be something else, right? And that I'm not saying I agree with that conclusion or not, but that is the message of that particular episode. Whereas this one's a little bit more of, yeah, we fucked it up and we fucked it up for real, but in the end it worked out, but it partly worked out because we had communication with this one guy who went back and relayed, it was a little bit of a different resolution, very nuanced difference. But I do think that there's a sort of a tangible difference there alongside of the important factor that Voyager itself was in danger, even though the fact that Voyager was in danger did not really play into this plot to a huge degree, other than it's what was keeping them stuck there in that particular spot until they sorted it out in the end.
So you're saying the message is basically you can have the Voyager up there floating like a god, and it can have some immediate sort of interpretable effects, but ultimately they would have gotten to where they were going regardless of that. Because in the Orville, that's explicit. They state that. They state that outright. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
We don't worry about it. We don't feel guilty because what you perceive as influence. It was just going to be something else. We had a dark period and don't worry about it.
Okay, so. Yeah, you're right.
Whereas in this one, it's more like, well, you fucked it up, but we managed to nevertheless overcome that because you fucked it up.
Because on at least a very sort of immediate level, we are affected by necessity in terms of the inventions that we create. So like, for example, that theirs was, they had a ton of iron because they had to keep their walls up. Now, I guess when you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, I guess that's when you can start wondering. It's like, oh well, did it all? Even though there were a few fluctuations and permutations here and there, is it all the basic structure of how they would have been anyways?
Yeah, and again,
and you never know because like, how can you predict what a structure of a culture is?
Exactly. I think that's the key factor, is that it's very difficult to predict because massive changes can come about because of small influences. That's true, but you don't necessarily know what those massive changes are going to be. Does a society become? I mean, honestly, another response the society could have had to all those earthquakes is not building bigger and stronger buildings, but the opposite, becoming more hunter-gatherer style, returning to the land and distributing the population in such a way that the effects would be minimal. Because if you're in a small one-story structure and you live on a big farm or a field or in a forest, the effects of the earthquake are going to be far less than if you live in massive iron high-rises with all sorts of reinforcing beams and stuff.
If your house is made out of sticks, then you can just fucking rebuild it if it breaks down.
And I'm not suggesting that that's what you have to do. It's just that the point being is that there are actually a number of different responses, and there's no way to know which response is going to be the one that wins out. And it's not necessarily because that response is the correct response that it wins out. Cultures often develop maladaptive social structures, technologies, etc., not because they're destined to, but because that's just how things happen to go that way. I mean, the classic example is World War I. The setup was there, but the actual thing that started World War I was a complete goofy ass fluke. And go look up the history, guys. It's the assassination
it's a
of
hilarious riot.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it, but the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand is a pretty fucking hilarious story. And so it started World War I, and you could look back and suggest, well, the situation was such that some sort of conflict was expected. But it happened in a very particular way, which then unfolded in a very particular way because of a fluke assassination of a particular guy. It could have been an assassination of a different person. It could have happened at a different time, in a different city, in a different country, and that would have created a completely different path that there's no way for us to map out as a counterfactual and predict. I just did find that a very interesting sort of a little bit of a nuanced difference between those two episodes. I'm planning on loading up the Orville episode soon and watching it just to refresh my memory of it, because I do recall it being very interesting, very fun, even though it was a story that had been done before by Voyager and also done in not as elegantly as Voyager, but we've seen a similar kind of story in a few other places as well.
I don't think that the Orville really tries to pretend that it's not drawing directly from 90s Star Trek.
Although this was straight up the same story.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, again, different direction, different vibe to it, and all that.
Maybe it's like he saw that episode and he was thinking to himself, well, this is what I think should have happened instead, or something. Yeah. Or who knows?
Could have been.
That, go
gadget shoes.
Gotana? Is it Gotana? Gotana rents?
No thanks. I already had some.
Oh.
I ate earlier.
Oh my gosh.
Say it again. Team me up again.
What is it?
Team me again.
What is it?
Gotana Ritz.
No thanks, I'm married.
He had a weird they had a weird wall joystick on their spacecraft. What's that? Why?
That was some old school like spacecraft. It was like some kind of Mercury shit.
Yeah. How do you decide which side you're going to sit on? Like if you're right-handed, I guess you get used to it, but
astronauts are ambidextrous, dude.
It's like if you're not ambidextrous, you can't be in the program.
You're not it. That's not it.
It's fuck, man.
You got to swim and you got to be.
I thought I gave him credit for
getting
doing
rid of a lot of that talent pool by following that left.
So this was 2000. This came out a few years after Apollo 13, and I gave them credit for in this TV show where they have a limited amount of time to tell their story. They had them going through like little pre-check and doing the sort of more contemporary style of technobabble, and it really looked like they were in a spaceship, like pushing buttons. It didn't have as many buttons perhaps as a spaceship of that, of the Mercury era, but it gave off a good vibe. I
It
thought
didn't seem as advanced as even Apollo, but it was,
Yeah,
they,
it was
they were
definitely-
able to get up into
It was
space.
definitely some Mercury Gemini style
But they were
action.
they were flying fast because so their shields when they were getting shot at, first their shields were at 82%. Then a few seconds later, it was at 64%. All right. At that rate, they were going to go down in like a minute or so. But then they were able to have Gotana Rets
I already gave it The Office.
fly down. They were like, okay, we're getting shot. 82%, 64%. Fuck. Okay, go down to the planet.
I like my favorite part was when Janeway was like, "Fuck, fuck."
Oh no. Not on my watch. But like they had time to wait for him to fly back to the planet, implying that he was flying pretty quickly, But then again, I guess the closer he gets to it,
Flying/falling.
the closer.
I mean, effectively.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. In space, it's yes. I mean, orbit is just like you're constantly falling at a rate that you're going forward.
No
Yeah.
one can hear you scream.
Orbiting is like in the Hitchhiker's Guide where you just
fly.
you throw yourself at the ground and miss.
Yeah, that's actually really awesome.
Don't they have like an
like, yeah, it's kinda right.
improbability drive? There's
Yeah.
an improbability drive.
My favorite thing in the Hitchhiker's Guide is the somebody else's problem field, the SCP field, and it's I get the Arthur Dent asks Ford Prefect, he's like, oh, is it like a cloaking device? And Ford Prefect is like, no, cloaking devices are too fucking expensive. This is somebody else's problem field. All it does is it just makes it so you ignore it. You're just like, no, I don't even want to deal with it. So you can just walk around like just like a fucking lunatic. Nobody cares.
So he fell at the planet at a rate that must have been pretty fast. Although as the closer he's getting to the planet, I guess time's speeding up if time's dilating, does that mean it's speeding up or slow? I guess it's slowing
Dilated
down.
at 10 centimeters.
So anyway,
It's hard to think
Ready to
about
go.
it too much.
Yeah,
Like,
it doesn't-
you'll go fucking nuts if you try to think about it.
yeah. So anyways, it was sort of like an unrealistic expectation regardless, considering they're getting shot every few seconds, but he was getting close to the planet. I don't know. I just think they would have blown up at the rate they were getting shot at. I mean, they're losing 8% at a time. That's fucked up.
Like, okay, they're up in space, and then the other guys have like several years to figure out how to hit them with like some crazy ass weaponry. So,
In a few
like,
seconds.
So like you figure that like why didn't they hit them? Like, I mean, they were hitting them and they were taking out their shields or something. But like,
You would think that each hit would be stronger than the last.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah, so
like crack cocaine.
like a whole lot stronger.
Like crack
Yeah,
cocaine,
so-
but it turns out that's not the truth.
So they had all this like old Atari spaceship that they flew up with. And oh, by the way, I took anthropology 101, and our teacher said that there was I don't know if this was how he presented this, if it was a fact or if it was just a study show kind of thing. But he was saying there's no such thing as left-handedness. There's right-handedness and no-handedness. So if you're left-handed,
I think that
you're going to be
guy was
ambidextrous.
wrong.
I think that sounds fucked up.
I say that as
As a left-handed
both a
person.
qualified anthropologist and a left-hander.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, so right, I don't know. Maybe it was just some study he read. I don't even remember how much he promoted it, but I do remember him talking about it. It seems that if you're left-handed, most of the reason
was
you'd be
this guy
ambidextrous.
into like phrenology?
It seems like
Did he talk like this? Hello, Dan. Welcome to the anthropology
In
class.
the future, it's going
My
to be
name is
like
Heinz.
this.
it seems like if you were left.
Today we learn about the races and the bumps on the head.
It seems like if you were left-handed, and if more left-handed people are ambidextrous, it would probably be because everything's for right-handed
Precisely,
people.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know.
We know, and honestly, it could be that the state of neurological science at the time said, didn't have this information yet. I don't know. I don't recall.
What are you talking about? 98, 90, or 2000? The year 2000?
when you took the anthropology class, which would have been around then, right?
Yeah, that's like 2001, 2000. Something.
So, because you're absolutely spot on that we know there are left-handed folks and there are right-handed folks. We also know, for example, cats.
I'm spot on. I'm not making any assertions here.
Cats. I'm asserting that you're asserting.
Yeah, that's false.
Cats are left-handed, predominantly. Cats are mostly left-handed, and some cats are right-handed, but cats are mostly left-handed. We know that because we know that's the paw they favor when they reach out for toys. Most cats are left-handed.
Meow.
I'm mostly right-handed, but I'm
Meow,
a little
meow,
bit left-handed.
meow.
Most
I can do
humans,
lots of stuff with
most
my
humans
Meow.
are right-handed, and
Meow,
now
meow.
the reasons for that are complicated and not fully understood. But it is the point that I'm asserting that you're asserting that is correct, or I'm asserting that you're supposing, and I'm
there you go.
suggesting you in the future may assert, is
Supposing
that
is probably more
left-handers tend, and I speak from the life experience of a left-hander, and having many left-handed associates.
You just don't like somebody reducing your experiences to like some kind of.
It could be some of that, but it could also be the
Nobody
practical.
does.
That I agree with
it's
you
true.
that left-handers tend to be good with their right hand better than with their right hand than right-handers with their left hand out of necessity.
Yeah.
If a left-hander picks up some fucking right-handed scissors, oh my god, that's the worst fucking thing in the world. I have to use the right hand to cut, and then I still cut all shitty.
I've heard about that.
I still cut all shitty because I'm cutting with my right hand,
Yeah.
but I'm cutting better than with my left hand using right-handed scissors, for example. So I end up using my right hand. And in my case, I am right-eyed as opposed to left. Like, usually the eye stuff matches up, but like, for example, if I'm shooting a weapon or playing golf, I
shoot right-handed.
I shoot right-handed.
Are you using the Nintendo Zapper?
Or if I'm using the Nintendo Zapper, I shoot right-handed, I play golf right-handed, I bat baseball right-handed, but I catch baseball left-handed. Motherfuckers.
Well, it's like a lot of
and I
like
throw left-handed.
like guitar.
So you have to switch your glove?
Guitar playing and violin playing. You pretty much play right-handed, even if you're left-handed. Like there's only been a few people like Jimi Hendrix or
Dan.
Paul McCartney that have actually played left-handed instruments.
Yeah, right.
Dan.
Like most
me.
people that are left-handed play right-handed instruments.
Dan, in baseball, you only wear the glove when you're when you're batting. You just hold. You don't have.
You said I throw right-handed and
I said
throw,
I catch right-handed.
And you said I catch left-handed and throw left-handed. That's what you said.
No, I said I catch. We're gonna rewind that.
We're
tape.
gonna have to roll back to tape.
Audience, I want everyone on Facebook and
Instant
Twitter
replay.
and Instagram.
I don't think radio.
Writing.
I don't think radio transmission could possibly be obsolete in a couple hundred years.
All right.
What do you use when everything else fails?
Yep. You're implying that everything else will fail. If everything's working, you don't need it.
Well, no, but I'm saying
it's gonna fail.
But you're gonna want it around just in case, probably. Although
everything's
I'm not
gonna
saying
fail.
it goes away. I'm saying it reduces to the level where it becomes essentially imperceptible when you take into account the statistics of chance and stuff that you're going to happen. If your planet is blasting out radio signals across the majority of its surface, that increases the chance that an alien civilization will receive one of those many spread around in all directions radio signals.
Yeah.
If radio, as it already has become reduced in importance and the use of it is different, so you don't have TV stations and AM stations blasting it across the entire fucking planet. When that goes away, that reduces the number of signals that are coming off the planet. The signals that remain coming off the planet are smaller, more localized, and a lot of them, frankly, aren't even pointing to broadcast to everybody because that's not what they're being used for anymore. They're now being used to broadcast to a very specific location or something. So different strokes for different folks.
Well, yes, of course. Yes, of course. When we rely more on digital signals and stuff, like we're not going to use it as much.
It's not that it becomes. It's not that it goes away. I wouldn't even say that it becomes obsolete. It's just that the purpose shifts.
Well, yeah,
and it becomes less prevalent because the purpose has become more narrow.
I think it was like
niche.
the original purpose of the radio was just to give emergency information, and then they decided to fill it up with commercials and then content.
Yeah,
stuff
well, I
like
mean, the
that.
original purpose was holy fuck.
Well, I mean,
Holy fuck! Look what I did.
yeah. Okay.
Marconi was just screaming, "Holy fuck!
Okay. The
Holy fuck!" Was he Italian?
He did it in
Or
Italian.
was he American?
I think.
Hey.
okay. The original purpose.
I speaking into the radio, shaka jock.
The original
Fuck you.
The original purpose of like broadcast radio in the U.S. I'm sorry, I was being very presumptuous.
No.
In that
I
statement.
know. But you are strengthening my point in the sense
I'm not.
that
What?
you're strengthening my point.
I wasn't trying to
There's-
strengthen or de-strengthen. I wasn't trying to. I don't think we're disagreeing. I think we both agree that yes, the less you need something, the less you'll use it. But it's still going to be hanging
I just
around.
don't know why you keep bringing it up.
Well, because I didn't know.
Marconi was born in Italy and died in Italy.
What?
Hey, he liked the pepperoni.
I was just feeling like we were making separate points, but
Northern Italy.
we were presenting it as if we were in conflict with each other when we were just making separate points.
That's how we get ratings, Dan. That's how we get all the millions of listeners that we've gotten so far. They tune in every week for Jesse's wisdom and Dan and Pat just going at it, sparring back and forth. Rat-a-tat-tat.
You know, it's a strange.
Jesse's wisdom. I like that.
It's a
We
strange.
can do a separate podcast.
It's got Jesse's wisdom.
It's a strange assumption that they would think that there would be a place to dock their ship on a strange ship that they'd never heard of before,
And they didn't show it.
without any help from the outside. At least
I was surprised, although I guess it's production costs or time or whatever. I was surprised that we didn't really see the whole like on Enterprise what you would have seen, because they showed a lot on Enterprise, would be the ship landing on the ship, and then they would be like trying to figure out how to open the door,
Yeah.
and they'd be like looking down in there, and they'd be like, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
In this case, we just see them get near the ship, and then the next thing is they're just like crawling on a
They're
ladder.
climbing into it, and then they're there.
Yeah,
Like
they're just looking
They're
around.
like, wait a minute.
At first, I was like, wait, are they still in their ship? I'm confused. I was like, at first, for a moment when they were just going down the ladder, I was like, wait, are they going down the ladder? Are they in their ship going down the ladder? Like, what's happening? And then I was like, oh, they're already on the ship.
They got there and they were like, wait, this isn't the Enterprise. This is Voyager.
We're on the wrong show. You got their stunt double.
So you would, presuming that they could fit it in there, because I'm guessing that they have to accommodate for a lot of non-standard ship sizes or ship docking sizes, because they're talking to aliens and stuff, so they have different standards. That's how it works. There's different standards depending on where you come from. So that's why a standard is not truly a standard, or that's a dangerous word anyways, right? That's the whole that's very tolerant, right?
Standard is a dangerous word.
It's a form of fascism. Standards.
So anyway,
Basically, yeah.
standards are a form of fascism. You have no standards. I have no standards. It's fascist. When they go in, you can assume that, there's probably some sizes that fit right in, maybe. But regardless, you're probably going to need some kind of help from the inside.
Some kind of Star Trek.
And even if you don't, even if you somehow duct taped your ass onto that ship, how are you going to open the thing from the outside?
How did they do that?
Like, I don't know.
It just shows them like crawling down a
Did they
ladder.
blast it open or something?
Yeah, I don't know. That seems like they would be
and
too
nobody
smart to
knew
do
on
that.
the ship because everybody was in like a different time action.
Yeah.
Like,
I wonder if in the writer's room they were like, all right, they dock on the ship. How do they get in? And then somebody else is like, oh, they get in because they have to for the story. That's how they get in.
They just gotta get in there.
How much is it going to cost to show this? No, we don't have to worry about that because they have to be in there. Let's just skip that shit.
Do you think if Gotana rents...
I pay a mortgage, Dan.
No, thank you, sir.
I own my house.
It's cheaper to own.
It is cheaper in some cases, depending on the economy, but the interest rates are such that owning a house right now is a good deal.
Do you think that in his case where every second counts a fucking day, do you think he would have talked a little faster? Been like, okay, we got to fucking talk about this really fast so we can like get through this.
Chill.
He was chill. Do you think it's at that point it's so far-fetched that you would get back home in any kind of reasonable time? Like, who cares at this point? But I mean, every second they spend, he's talking about the difference between, future and super future, And so...
it's something that I thought would have been just a little line of dialogue would have been helpful, where if they had just made it clear, or if he had said something along the lines of, Janeway's like, I understand if you want to go back. And it would have been cool if he would say, like, you know what? The problem is everyone's already dead. Like I've been here too long. I might as well chill here, learn as much as I can, and then go back with more information. That's implied. I mean, it's implicit in what's going on. While I'm not a huge fan of just needless, textual references to everything, I think this is an example where, from a character perspective, it would have been helpful to explain more about like what his attitude was and how he was understanding what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, his whole thing was just kind of like, yeah, it's my dream, let's do it. I wonder if his second was more like every couple hours, if he'd be a little more rushed. Did you, when he went to talk
something
to
somebody went.
Who was he talking about? The seismic detectors back then were off by a variance of 3.8. Who was that? Was that Belana or is that Tuvok?
He was talking to Seven.
Yeah, that's what it was. Right, Seven. So he was talking to Seven about that.
She had all the math in her part of the ship.
Yeah, she had all the.
She had astrometrics.
Yeah, she did to the max, and so her
big fan of astrometrics.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So their
I was young once.
So their data was all outdated. They had outdated data.
It was dated data.
Yeah, it was dated data, but. What does that mean? How would if somebody asked you to tell them information about Earth, like what would the seismic detectors back then were off by a variance of 3.8.
It's an oversimplification.
Who would know that, and what does that really mean? It's like talking about earthquakes.
It's nerd talk.
Maybe it's because there's so many earthquakes. They all know about earthquake talk.
They have an earthquake. How often do they have an earthquake? Like 5 times a month or something?
It's like something like that.
In the context of the show, in the context of the show, it was fine. It was like, okay, you have this data. We know from the next 100 or 200 years
Data.
that those original detectors were slightly off, and we know how much they were off by. That's not uncontroversial. What becomes controversial is wait a second, every detector for a set period of time was off by that exact same amount. Come on,
Yeah, it was the whole like turning a planet into one small
it's
civilization.
homogenizing the planet. And as you note, why does this guy, I know this guy is a super smart astronaut, and the people deal with earthquakes a lot, but is he a geologist? I mean, why does he know that very specific technical fact? I mean, I could buy him knowing about earthquakes and that it's serious business and they have smart people dealing with it, but they also have smart people that they're turning into astronauts to fly up and see the sky ship.
Yeah, you can't know everything, man.
Sky Friends! What were they called? Sky Friends?
It was the
Skyship Friends.
Skyship Friends.
Skyship Friends, yeah. It was Skyship Friends. You just said that.
I just said that.
You just said that.
My name is Jesse.
We got it all on UHF.
So, all right. So
It's got Star Trek.
we got to start wrapping things up now. There were a couple of comments on Facebook. One by Peter Smith, who says, quite simply, Blink of an Eye is one of the best written, most adventurous, and well acted, and thoroughly enjoyable episodes of Star Trek ever committed to film.
Of Star Trek.
Each time it is mentioned in any of the many chat groups I'm a member of, it is spoken of very highly by all. Now
Who is this guy?
Is this person
Peter Smith.
Peter Smith.
He was in a Voyager group.
So he's in a Voyager group.
Yeah,
okay, that's
Facebook group on Voyager.
See, now here's the thing. It was a good episode, and it was one of the best Voyager episodes. But to say it makes more sense that this person is in a Voyager group and would say that it's the best Star Trek because that's being a little bit.
Because he's in a Voyager.
He's in a Voyager group, and they're defensive enough as it is, right?
But I will say, I agree with everything you just stated. And I agree that, I remembered this episode. This episode was memorable, but I didn't remember it as much as some other even Voyager episodes that I also had not seen in a long time. But like Year of Hell, for example, I remembered much better than this episode. So this episode is all about the concepts.
That was really, I only ever watched, that was the only one I ever remember watching when it was on was Year of Hell.
That stands out.
I never watched much Voyager.
That
I happened to catch
out.
that and I was like, wow, this is great.
But since in the last few weeks we've discussed some other real classic episodes of Trek, you look at cause and effect. This story in this episode, in Blink of an Eye, is much more substantive than cause and effect, right? And we tend to remember cause and effect more. And I think partly it's because cause and effect is so simple, so straightforward. There is a lot of repetition, even though they do go out of their way in that episode to not repeat the repetition, if you know what I'm saying. Like, they do change it up.
I know what he's saying.
But it reinforces a very, very narrow, specific tale. But this story really did have a lot more meat in terms of philosophical, discussion and stuff around the Prime Directive, around cultural influence, religion versus science. It left a lot.
Evolutionary,
it dropped a lot of it dropped a lot of stories. It's not like it's a perfect episode, but it definitely has more kind of to hang on and
it
think
makes you
about.
think. Yeah, it's a lot more to think about.
I'll say this: it's been easier to talk about this episode for like an hour and a half than cause and effect.
Yeah.
In the sense that there's just more to explore here.
So the point about the doctor, how they went out of their way to mention that he had a kid in a relationship. It seems like that could have been explored more. Obviously, not in the course of one episode. No,
there's some dropped threads.
Yeah, so it's like, why did they really need to go that far with it? I guess they could have gone. I think they could have gone a little. Whatever. It's what they did.
It is not as tightly written as cause and effect, but it has even those dropped threads. We're talking about them. You're thinking about them. You're like, oh, what does that mean? What are the implications?
It's true. It would be nice if they could sort of go out, expand upon that a little bit. I would say the ending is actually kind of touching. The last about minute, 30 seconds or a minute,
I agree.
Where he's basically. You discover as he's discovering, you find out that his life's work was to help the problems that have been plaguing the planet for thousands of years. But also, when you brought up that Voyager was suffering too, he also simultaneously was helping those that accidentally were causing it.
Because he could have gone down there, said his piece, and they'd be like, oh, they are causing the problem. Now we'll just blow them out of the fucking sky. He could have reported that they were almost damaged anyway, so it wouldn't take that much more to blow them out of the sky.
But he went through the effort.
Yeah.
And so you see him kind of contemplating that. Just showing him in that scene as an old person sort of looking at this, as an older person looking at the sky, you're like, wow, like like I said, we were learning as he was that this, after the fact, looking back, is like, we don't always know what our life's work is going to be, if that's even a thing or whatever. But like, that's what it emerged as being for him. And it was all interesting about his life work is it wasn't that he did go on an adventure, but really the problem that was causing all these issues that was like this grand kind of thing was caused by a snafu on the part of Voyager.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is it's not like he slayed a dragon or whatever like that. He was just there and did the right things at the right time, when they were supposed to be done, and he got the job done. And it turned out to be some fucking epic shit, but it was just kind of like a small mistake that ended up having being amplified. But it was sort of like the act of him discovering the consequences of his actions and all that stuff made it worth it. But it's interesting.
Especially for a character introduced so late in the episode.
Yeah, and that was the other thing is it seems like that would have been like on the second episode. It would be good to have two parts to have him sort of on the second episode.
And maybe see a little bit more of what's going on to the planet with him, because we sort of abandoned the planet after that. Like I said, the planet becomes antagonistic, and then we no longer see the planet. Mm-hmm. We only experience the effects of the planet.
So I guess with the time compensator, that was when he went up in there and talked to them. First of all, he should have done that before they started putting a tractor beam on their ship. When those two ships came up.
Sort of explained what was happening.
Yeah, but instead of it's like
we're not going to fuck you up.
Yeah,
a little manufactured drama.
Because Paris wanted to fuck. Yeah, Paris wanted to fuck him up. So, but he was basically saying. I think he implied the implication that I got was that, and maybe I'm just conflating that with what the ending was, but. Was that it was taking him a while to work with, and obviously it did because it took several seconds each time. But so his life that we never got to see was him probably battling with like all these like politics and bureaucracy,
and it was a beautiful thing to see him watch as Voyager warped away. And that was
all super old,
which also would have taken much longer than it wouldn't have gone away in a blink of an eye. It would have taken like. How long do you think it took him to warp away?
Well, I mean, but you see him,
still up
he's
there.
like old though.
Yeah.
Like you could tell that.
But you saw the moment it blinked away. It blinked away. It should have taken
I bought it. I thought for dramatic, even if it's for dramatic effect.
It's still gonna, what you perceive is still gonna be like, it's gonna go away.
Well, I mean,
but over the course of a day, not a second.
Ultimately,
Probably.
this
Whatever. It doesn't really
story
matter.
This story matches up with some of the best.
I mean, warp is really fast, so I'll buy that warp could have been.
Worf is pretty fast too.
Worf is a bad motherfucker.
Worf goes.
Do Klingons have two penises?
He's a cool dude. Yeah, because they got a backup of everything.
I've never got an answer to do Klingons have two penises? Though?
Yeah,
because they do have the backup.
Yeah, they got the backup of everything.
They got that backup.
Yeah,
he likes to back it up.
Yeah, beep beep. He's a cool guy.
But this story it follows in the tradition of a lot of particularly TNG storytelling or Miyazaki storytelling. If you're into the Studio Ghibli
if you're
film,
into that,
which you should be,
because it's pretty good.
Miyazaki storytelling, a lot of TNG storytelling. Roddenberry tried to do this in TNG. He wasn't as good as the later writers who kind of took it up. But the idea of where any conflict turns out to be the result of either a misunderstanding or of a mismatch in perspective. In other words, two people looking at the same thing and because of the constraints on the information either of them have, they're looking at it from a different way, and that the story is resolved by increased communication, more accurate communication, and the willingness of multiple sides, both sides or multiple sides, being able to make an attempt at the very least to see things from the perspective of the other party. And this is a wonderful example of that. And the ending shot was it was cinematic. It was touching. And it wrapped that in a bow that this, like you said, this guy, this old man, his life's work was meshing those two perspectives together in order to help both parties. The planet and Voyager both were better off for the resolution than if they had just blown Voyager up, for example, or if Voyager had blown them up.
Right. And it's pretty impressive that they were able to convey all that in just a few seconds.
Yeah.
And
that was really impressive.
That was, and it was also kind of like took a turn because up until then, the episode really hadn't been spent any time sort of being too, introspective or what about,
Yeah,
I mean, they were approaching, they were providing ideas and they were, sort of exploring.
Chakotay was just trying to advance his career. And
yeah.
B'Elanna was just, Neelix, thankfully, was only pouring coffee for a minute.
Yeah.
Harry Kim was basically not in
He
this.
wasn't even in it. He had
probably
a line,
slept
one
in
line.
or something.
He was playing clarinet too late into
Yeah.
the night,
Like
drinking
man.
too much Ractigino and Romulan ale.
I think they could have
Ractigino.
hit those bastards with a couple of photon torpedoes and been done with it and just flown off.
They'd already done
whatever,
enough to
whatever,
people.
John Bolton, whatever, Henry Kissinger.
Exactly. That was the Kissinger Bolton.
So,
All right.
But anyways, yes, the episode was, it did present ideas and explore them and stuff. This was probably the only emotional kind of part, I would say, of the
Yeah.
episode. It was more, and it kind of came out of nowhere, but at the same time it fit, and it was
did,
really
yeah.
good.
Yeah, and one other comment on Facebook that I thought was really great was, in the photo I put up, it was the Doctor getting poked in the head by Janeway, and I said, like this week on It's Got Star Trek, the Doctor finds a roommate in a blink of an eye, right? Just sort of making a joke
Yeah.
on the fact that guy shacked up with a lady and had a baby pretty darn quick.
Yeah.
3 years, guys. I'm not saying they can't have love at first sight. I'm
He's
just
a
saying
doctor, though. He's a doctor.
That just makes it more suspicious. Is he sleeping with his patients? I mean, I don't know.
Don't make any contact.
This is pre-Me Too, but I'm suspicious. Just like you get, retroactively more Geordi becomes problematic. I think the Doctor might be a little problematic too. But
Don't make any contact except if you want some
He's-
romance,
The doctor,
because Janeway can understand
he's
that.
not Geordie, though. I think we can say
He's not Geordie,
He's
no.
not Geordie.
but
There's no inappropriate junior officer relations.
I posted that picture and, saying, he got a roommate in a blink of an eye. And immediately somebody responded with the comment, "Is this his roommate?" And then had a picture of Robert Picardo in Gremlins 2 with the lady gremlin trying to kiss him. it's a fantastic. He's like trying to squeeze her, and she's all like, Gremlins 2 rules.
Gremlins 2. That was one of the grossest movies I had seen up to that point. Like before Alien Resurrection. It was just like,
It really took a turn. It was.
there's a big
its
gap
own
between
thing.
that movie and Alien Resurrection, but
It was basically,
gross
let's do
movies.
Gremlins mixed with Die Hard. Gremlins in an office building instead of in a suburban town, in an office building.
So this planet rotates at 58 RPM. That's fucking fast. Like,
Although that the important other
yeah, is there
we need
something
to
I
know?
missed? Because it looked like a donut. It looked like a gas giant, or not a gas
RPM
giant. It looked like a gas planet.
RPM is only one data point. The other data point we need is what is the radius of the planet? What is the mass? Like that makes
Still-
RPM makes it like think about it with a record. Like a 45 versus
Well,
like,
yeah.
the
78.
RPM, the size
yes, of
means-
course.
So in other words, if you play a 45 at 78 is a normal record playing speed, but if you play it at that 45 at that speed, it's going to be wrong, right?
Actually,
So-
33 and a third is the regular.
Well, look, I
33
mean,
and a third,
I'm
78, 45.
78 is like the older.
I'm aware of the implications of the size of the thing that is rotating, because
Yeah.
it's going to mean the outside is going
I'm just
to be
saying,
going
if they had
faster.
given us that information, it would have made the 58 the
Yeah, it would have.
RPM. So, for example, if it's it's a pointless thing to talk about, I guess, because
Well,
I'm like,
pretty much.
No,
it's just meaningless. But
But I'm going to say, regardless, if you're a planet that has enough
Yeah.
gravity to hold a person, if the moon was going 58 RPM, that would be fast as fuck.
yeah, no,
you know?
you're right, and I don't know why they're not being flung off due to centrifugal force.
And when-
that's why I wanted to know the mass of the planet. Does it have more gravity, which is holding them down?
It's got a tachyon
Well,
field.
it's strange when you see an image of it. It looks like a donut. It
Yeah.
kind of it's going in on the top. So is it got the outside of a gas planet and it's solid on the
How is
inside?
it-
But
I have to assume if
maybe
we were applying,
they're like rings. Maybe what we're
It was
looking
surrounded
at.
by a tachyon field.
Maybe
if we were applying real physics to this, we'd have to wonder what the gravity was in order to
Yeah.
hold people, and not only people, the atmosphere. Why isn't the atmosphere flinging off? There's a lot of energy in this system, basically. Anyway,
I mean, Jesse, you see that image? It looks like a donut planet.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you can see it from here, Patrick. It looks like a donut planet.
It's a squashed planet.
I'm wondering if that's like supposed to be like the rings of Saturn, except it's surrounding the whole planet, or if that's the surface. If it was going 58 RPMs at different places, like if they said the whole planet wasn't. Yeah,
but
they're not giving enough information.
yeah, because
here.
RPM is also 58 RPM would be at the equator, but then at the poles, it's
it would
not
be going slower.
I mean, it's still rotating,
but it would the speed, the
but
velocity.
so the RPM would be less relevant because you're
Yeah.
just standing in place.
So they didn't give us enough information. If they were going to give
Didn't
us
fucking give us enough information, goddammit.
if they were going to tell us about 58 RPM, yeah, they should have told us a few more things, because I mean,
1885.
I mean, I guess all they mentioned when they talked about transporting people down there is they talked about how your time body would have to change.
Yeah, as you're transporting, aren't the mountains like fucking slicing your molecules up as the planet's orbiting by?
Yeah, right.
The transport, even in the best of cases in the Voyager area, takes a few seconds.
Yeah, and so there's that, and they talked about when the reason the Doctor had to go down there is because he's the only one that could survive like the temporal disjunction or whatever you want to call it.
He wanted to get laid. He got bored of all the ladies and the men on the ship.
But if you're going to transport...
He explored everything humanity had to offer.
If you're going to transport down to a planet that's going 58 RPM, it seems like it'd be kind of a shot. You'd have to catch up to speed. You know what I mean? Like they'd have to... Can they transport you in motion? They have to if they're going to... Because all planets are moving, so they have to be able to transport you in some kind of motion.
I think you've just invalidated all of Star Trek for me. Let's give up this podcast and switch over to the Fried Green Tomatoes podcast that I've been trying to...
No!
It's got fried green tomatoes. Every week we'll discuss another aspect of the movie Fried Green Tomatoes. I think it came out in 1991.
Is the truth always worth it if this is what's the result of it? I mean, Fried Green Tomatoes is a good movie, but you know, if we're gonna ditch this podcast the Fried Green Tomatoes simply because I revealed the truth, is that really worth it? Spent all this time wondering if I could. I never once considered if I should.
Yeah, Jeff Goldblum is pretty cool.
Yeah, he's all right though.
Let's wrap it up. Final comments.
I want to make it clear that I don't. We explored the opening of Voyager, the Voyager's opening versus TNG. We did explore it enough, but I also don't want to... I don't know if I think... I was watching it, I was like, this is more visually interesting than the TNG's opening, but there's many factors that go into why one was one and one was the other.
You know what's fucked up? I don't know if this is fucked up. It's a subjective opinion.
Cancer.
What I think is fucked up is these days, and I'm a 40-year-old white gentleman living in the United States of America on the Eastern Seaboard. So take that for what it's worth.
No.
But these days, I am less likely to skip the Enterprise theme than the Voyager theme. Or frankly, even the Deep Space Nine theme.
It's been a long...
That's weird, dude.
It's weird. It's weird, but I gotta say...
the only one I watch is the TNG.
TNG I generally watch.
Sometimes the...
I watch the Discovery and Picard. I don't know. I like both those themes, so I usually watch those, and I'm usually watching them on a service that I can't skip the theme if I wanted to.
Oh yeah, with the Picard and Discovery, I can't skip it.
But I mean, I guess you could fast forward it if you want.
The other ones are on Netflix.
The Enterprise theme, I think, has gone from I didn't like it to begin with, and then I hated it for years, and I think it's starting to roll around on. Yeah, it's not that I like it; it's that it's comfort. There's something comfortable about it.
Getting from there to here.
I watched the Voyager theme for this episode just to give it a chance.
I like it. I mean, it's weird.
It's not bad.
It's not. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how to because if I'm sitting there analyzing it, I'm thinking this is great. This is visually dynamic and interesting. Yeah. The music is evocative of loneliness and exploration.
Well, that's why I was wondering if maybe I was thinking the visually stimulating stuff was just flashiness and not and which is more effective.
Maybe it just makes me uncomfortable because it's too effective because it's this lonely starship just floating around there. But which is no different than, I mean, the TNG one is the same, but there's something peppy about the TNG one. Discovery,
super
of course,
peppy and optimistic.
Yeah, Discovery has that,
and it super fit well with the original series. The style of what being sort of like this is like this is a new thing, but look, it's still flying in this empty space.
Discovery's got the whole architecture thing going. Picard's got that really wild.
See,
I had to grow on me a little bit. The kind of the motifs that show up throughout the season.
So visually with the Picard one, I liked right away. I think, but
that music is all sneaky.
The music, I still need more time because I still associate Voyager's music with Star Trek more than I associate Picard's. And Picard's, and I don't know if that's because of repetition or if it's because Voyager sounds more. But then again,
like, got to be style because the Voyager does have that 90s Trek horns, and fucking stringed instruments.
It is very 90s,
full orchestra.
But it's like kind of like played out, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, and
maybe that's why Enterprise went so weird.
That's Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah,
and it's
what did Jay Chataway do? Did he do DS9?
Jay Chataway? Didn't we play? No,
Jay Chataway I think scored.
That was
Voyager. I think he did Deep Space Nine.
He did like various.
I think he scored Voyager. I think Jerry Goldsmith did the opening theme or something, but then Jay Chataway.
Yeah, it says
did
Jay
the rest.
Chataway says he's composer of film and television scores. So
yeah, and he did a bunch of band.
He did the episode
band
scores.
music. We played in band or even jazz band.
So we did play Jay Chataway.
We totally played Jay Chataway's jazz band arrangements.
Okay.
We actually,
I was like, was I mixing him up with James Swearingen or something? But no, we played Jay Chataway.
James Vanderbeek.
Jay
I don't want
Cook. Jay
your life.
Cook did the music for the Generations, Star Trek Generations.
Okay, I think that's a sign that we're about done here.
Generations. Wait, he did the theme for Generations? That's just the Star Trek theme.
No,
there's extra bits.
no. Generations has its own
he added
deal
the
going.
extra bits. Yeah.
Generations has a pretty.
I haven't heard that
decent
music
score.
in a while. Oh, you're talking about the score.
The score.
Oh, I was
the theme music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, each thing has its own
There
little
was,
score, whippity bippity.
But they all have a different opening.
He was a clinician at like a marching band thing I went to.
You're talking about Generations, the movie.
Yeah.
Mm.
As opposed to Star Trek 6, which has that really like that Batman score at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, Star Trek. I mean, at some point, for the audience, we know a lot of you like the music of Star Trek out there, and we're going to try to figure out how to do some episodes focused on the music.
We're going to talk about those YouTube videos where people are rapping in Klingon.
Actually, that's pretty cool.
That's
too.
a good idea. We should talk about that.
I haven't seen this yet.
But that's going to pretty much do it for us tonight. So let's give you the contact information. And did you guys want to decide on what to do next week?
Jesse, when I made that like noise, I wasn't trying to shut you down. I just want you to know that.
No. I like that noise.
Okay, I was
do that noise more.
I just got an intrusive thought and figured it was better than that than jumping off a building.
Yeah.
I know. That's why I was like, it's time to end because both Dan and myself are starting to do the what is that? Tourette's type thing where we're like, time to go to bed.
Maybe we should do an Enterprise one.
I'm always down to do Enterprise.
Yeah, let's
man.
do Enterprise.
I'm always down to clown.
We haven't done
Enterprise
as many
style.
of those.
The only one that I can think of not the only one, but the first one I keep thinking about is when I think Trip gets pregnant. But there's also another one where Trip, they grow a fake Trip because he's fucked up, and there's all these questions about that. Then there's also the one where they go to that desert planet and they play alien ball with the head security guard from Shawshank Redemption. And
You know what?
They have their shirts off.
I like that one. You know, that might be a good one because that one's got some interesting,
There was some kind of alien, like misunderstanding between cultures or something, isn't that?
yeah, it's
something
called Desert Crossing. Yeah, I mean, I think that might be a good one to do.
We could do the series finale.
No, we're not going to do the series finale. So, Desert Crossing, does that work for you guys? Season 1, episode 24? What do you think?
Sure.
All right. Okay, so we'll do Enterprise. We'll do Enterprise Season 1, episode 24, Desert Crossing. That's a really cool one, where Archer learns a few lessons about what it means.
But he gets mad about it first.
Yeah, he does get mad
He's
about
like,
it.
I don't understand, but a decent human being does blah. But that's just the thing.
He learns some lessons effectively in foreign policy that is more complicated than you might think. I really I think that's a good one to discuss because it does offer some sort of interesting debates.
There's also the ones not suggesting we've already decided for next week, but the ones with what's his name from Quantum Leap, Samuel Rockwell.
No, you're thinking of Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell.
You're thinking of the guy he was also on
Bakula?
No, he was on Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
I think it's something Rockwell or something. Dean Stockwell.
Dean
Stockwell. Yeah. I even got that before I found
Stockwell.
it. I was just looking for it.
Dean Stockwell. He plays he's in a few episodes.
He's passed away.
He has recently passed away.
Bummer, dude.
Not that recently.
But
did you know the singer of the Cranberries died last year?
yes,
That was a few years.
Oh, was
the
it?
Cranberries,
Cranberries.
cranberry,
The Cranberries.
the raspberries.
The raspberries.
So, in the meantime, next week we'll do Desert Crossing.
In the meantime.
And
is that?
and for this week, we're going to close up shop. And we're going to close up shop by
In the meantime.
regaling the audience with the various ways they can communicate and interact with us so that we can mesh our perspectives together and resolve all the problems in the world.
I think there's an Instagram.
What's the name of the episode again?
It's got Star Trek.
No, not that. God damn it.
Desert Crossing. Desert Crossing with the it's got the guy from Shawshank Redemption.
In the meantime, we can watch Desert Crossing. In the meantime, you can sail the seven seas.
That
seas.
song, yes.
Seas.
In the Navy, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
It's a little offensive to mention seas. when we're talking about an episode that has a desert.
Yeah, it's kind of tone deaf.
Like the C
Yeah.
word.
That's like
Seas,
water.
I'm sorry.
Water.
Yeah, water. I agree. That's
If you're a desert, then
point.
water's offensive.
Water
to the
shaming.
desert.
That's what I was trying to get
Water
at. You're like-
shaming.
you're like
Water-
water
you're like
shaming.
water
Water
shaming.
desert.
You're like sand shaming.
Moisture shaming.
Moisture shaming these people. All right. So, yes, Jesse alluded to the fact we have an Instagram, and the address for that is at It's Got Star Trek. We have a similar thing for Twitter. What is it? Dan?
at It's Got Star Trek.
Yes, there you go. We also have an email, and either of you want to offer up any ideas about what the email might be?
It's feedback.
Oh, feedback. Yes, I
At-
know that one.
It's Got Star Trek. Dot. No, not .com, just .com.
This is exciting. You guys are totally getting the right answers. Nobody mentioned anything about
Patrick is so proud.
I didn't give an extra dot. I was just emphasizing your dot for dramatic.
I just like that you're no longer telling people to go to It's Got Star Trek at feedback.com.
at feedback.com.
feedback.
All right. So, yeah, feedback at It's Got Star Trek.com.
Only who can save the... what is it? Only who can prevent forest fires?
We're on Facebook.
You said you, meaning
It's
you.
Got Star Trek.
The
We're
answer is
on
only I can prevent
YouTube
forest
at It's Got Star Trek. You can find us everywhere. Just search for It's Got Star Trek. And
It's not that hard. It's the internet.
it's not that
You
hard.
can figure it out.
You can find us. You can find us in all sorts of places, and you can contact us. And we very much would appreciate your contact lenses.
I wear glasses. I haven't worn my contacts in like 5 months.
Yeah. So
5 months.
Buy a TV.
and
buy a
and,
t-shirt.
and we recommend that, we bounce around the Star Trek universe, but we do recommend that you listen to all these episodes. You don't have to listen to them in order, of course, but if you do, that you will slowly learn more and more personal information about us, mostly about Dan, about his glasses wearing habits, and
My glasses wearing habits.
Because he used to wear contacts. I remember there was this whole stretch of time, and there was like, where did Dan's glasses go? It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I haven't seen them in
They're-
a decade.
one day he's going to show up and
And
he's
then-
going to just have scooped his eyeballs.
Decade
Like,
and a half
guys,
later,
I don't need eyes
and
anymore.
he's got glasses again.
Eyes are lame.
It's like nothing.
I have 10 eye holes.
You also, by the way, audience out there, you also have the option, it's not a directive, but you have the option to rate and review us on various services. Podchaser would be a good one.
Chod Pacer.
iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever they're calling it these days. That would be great.
Snapple Flodcast.
Google, whatever. Podchaser would be good, though. If you can do Podchaser, if you're not on an Apple device, if you're one of the many Star Trek fans that has an Android device, like most of us in this room, except for Jesse.
Wait a minute. I guess that's true. Most of us in this room.
You might say, well, I can't leave an Apple podcast review because, I'm not on there. Well, yeah, okay. Fair point. You can't do
Fine.
that. I mean, technically you could. By the way, we're not trying to tell you to go.
Nobody's making you.
Technically, you could download iTunes. Yeah, you could.
It's kind of
subscribe to the
presumptuous.
podcast,
It's kind of like...
and then you can rate and review.
But then they're just like, you think you're like
Why
worth
would you-
that much
why
to
would
us
you
that
do
we're
that?
going to fucking install iTunes on our computer
I
for
know.
you?
I'm right there with you. I'm not.
We don't want to know
installing
the
iTunes
answer
on
to
my
that.
computer.
We don't want to know the answer to that
I'm not going to do it,
question.
and I wouldn't do it for even my favorite podcast. But it could be that some of our fans are lunatics, and we're pro lunatic. So
Yeah.
we encourage any lunatic behavior, including
I'm cool with
downloading
that.
iTunes when you don't need to. But Podchaser would be an alternative. That's a popular rating and review platform that would help us out. If you want to rate and review us on Podchaser and increase the visibility of the program and increase the number of fans beyond the many millions that we've already gathered, we can always grow bigger, and that will allow us to, buy more shirts and mugs to
And
sell back at you.
Take over the world.
I have to point out that earlier I was trying to do like a Simpsons reference thing where Smokey the Bear and people were talking and I kind of fucked it up.
Monorail.
No, and I have in front of me
Monorail.
now. What it was is Bart was in front of Smokey the Bear, a statue of Smokey the Bear, and like he was talking and he says, "Only who can prevent forest fires?" And then Bart presses there's a U button and a me button, and then Bart presses the U button.
yeah.
And then Smokey goes, "You pressed U, referring to me. That is incorrect. The correct answer is you." So, I just want to make it clear that if I fucked it up and someone was like, "That dude fucked up the line. I hope he knows he fucked up the line." I'm letting you know I fucked up the line. So
He fucked up the line.
sometimes when people give quotes to things and they fuck it up, but they don't realize it, you're just like kind of like,
We
"Oh,
know he
man."
fucked up the line. Don't
You
worry.
remember tobacco.
I just it's the only thing more important is that
Tobacco.
you know that I know.
They're growing like the tomato tobacco hybrid.
Yeah.
So rate and review.
So gross.
It tastes like grandma.
Write us on Facebook, write us on Instagram, Twitter, wherever, and let us know, what we should do with Dan here. With since you fucked up the joke.
Oh yeah.
So
You're just like in general. What are we gonna do with this Dan?
no, not
just-
nonsense. I
no,
just meant
this is more-
specifically for this particular transgression.
We're just talking about immediate punishment.
And
not
please
like-
highlight any other transgressions by myself, Patrick, or whether it's Jesse or Dan or myself. If we have transgressed, please write in, explain to us how we've transgressed.
If I've said something offensive,
We'll read it and we'll get all like weirdly bitter about it, and then we'll pretend we don't care, and then we'll like come on the next episode and talk about how we don't care, and you'll get some form of enjoyment out of hearing the clear insincerity of our declarations that we're not.
All these guys do is talk
hugely
shit
upset.
about Fox News.
I know, right?
Fox News.
We'll give,
That one
we'll
guy.
give you a non-apology about Fox.
Yeah, we'll be all like, we respect all perspectives and stuff, and we won't mean it, but we'll want to mean it.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair compromise. All right. With that, I think that'll do it for us tonight. I wish everyone a very lovely week. And so that's goodbye from me, Patrick. And then from you, what's your name, Dan?
I'm Dan.
And then this guy over here,
I'm Jesse.
history expert, musician supreme, Jesse Knight. So
Supreme.
we look
Like a
forward
burrito.
to inserting ourselves into your ear holes, which is presumably the way the majority of you
That's how you receive this.
consume the podcast. Next week, that's what we'll do.
Turn
Desert Crossing, Enterprise, and otherwise, have a good one. We'll talk to you later. Dan looked like he had one more thing to
Oh,
say.
I did. It was gonna eat at me. Actually, I was just gonna say that. Wow, you're really thinking of me. If you turn it up loud enough, you can consume it through your bones.
Yeah.
That's all I was gonna say.
Yeah, just the vibration.
Yeah, that's what.
You can
Thank,
put the
That's how
speaker-
deaf people listen.
Put the
to
speaker in your crotch.
there you go. Thank you.
And that works for all variety of humans.
If you're deaf, just put the podcast in your crotch and turn it up really loud.
Thank you, Patrick.
You're very welcome, Dan. And with that, we'll say good night.
Good night.
There was a war?
The neighboring state decided to lob a few cannon shells at us. Our Tactical Air Command responded, and a new treaty was signed in a matter of weeks, but not before my apartment was in ruins.
Well, so they have aviation technology.
They're hardly savages, Captain. In fact, they're making great strides technologically, thanks in part to Voyager.
What do you mean?
From the moment our ship arrived in the sky, they've been trying to make contact. Our presence has encouraged invention, religion, science, art, even children's toys. They're all variations on a single theme. Voyager. Marisa even composed an aria based on the skyship. I sang the lyric.
Marisa.
She was my roommate. Three years is a long time, Captain. One needs companionship.
You'll get no argument from me.